Lastly, of the celestial weapons obtained by Arjuna from Rudra and Indra and Yama and Varuna and Kuvara and Drona and the illustrious Kripa, the wielder of Gandiva succeeded in slaying Vikatana's son Karna of effulgence like that of Surya himself. Even thus had thy brother been cursed and beguiled by many. As, however, he has fallen in battle, thou shouldst not grieve for that tiger among men. Section Vi. Vaisampayana said, having said these words, the celestial Rishi Narada became silent. The royal sage Yudhishthira, filled with grief, became plunged in meditation. Beholding that hero cheerless and unmanned by sorrow, sighing like a snake and shedding copious tears, Kunti, herself filled with grief and almost deprived of her senses by sorrow, addressed him in these sweet words of grave import and well suited to the occasion. O mighty armed Yudhishthira, it behoveth thee not to give way to sorrow thus. O thou of great wisdom, kill this grief of thine, and listen to what I say. I tried in past times to apprise Karna of his brothership with thee. The god Surya also, O foremost of all righteous persons, did the same. All that a well-wishing friend, from desire of good, should say unto one, was said unto Karna by that god in a dream and once more in my presence. Neither by affliction nor by reasons could Surya or myself succeed in pacifying him or inducing him to unite himself with thee. Succumbing to the influence of time, he became resolved upon wreaking his enmity on thee. As he was bent upon doing injuries upon you all, I myself gave up the attempt. Thus addressed by his mother, King Yudhishthira, with tearful eyes and heart agitated by grief, said these words, in consequence of thyself having concealed thy counsels, this great affliction has overtaken me. Possessed of great energy, the righteous king, then, in sorrow, cursed all the women of the world, saying, henceforth no woman shall succeed in keeping a secret. The king, then, recollecting his sons and grandsons and kinsmen and friends, became filled with anxiety and grief. Afflicted with sorrow, the intelligent king, resembling a fire covered with smoke, became overwhelmed with despair. Section 7. Vaisampayana said, the righteous Yudhishthira, with an agitated heart and burning with sorrow, began to grieve for that mighty warrior Karna. Sighing repeatedly, he addressed Arjuna, saying, if, O Arjuna, we had led a life of mendicancy in the cities of the Vrishnis and the Andakas, then this miserable end would not have been ours in consequence of having exterminated our kinsmen. Our foes, the Kurus, have gained in prosperity, while we have become divested of all the objects of life. For what fruits of righteousness can be ours when we have been guilty of self-slaughter? 4. Fie on the usages of Kshatriyas, fie on might and valor, and fie on wrath, since through these such a calamity hath overtaken us. Blessed are forgiveness, and self-restraint, and purity, with renunciation and humility, and abstention from injury, and truthfulness of speech on all occasions, which are all practiced by forest recluses. Full of pride and arrogance, ourselves, however, through covetousness and folly and from desire of enjoying the sweets of sovereignty, have fallen into this plight. Beholding those kinsmen of ours that were bent on acquiring the sovereignty of the world slain on the field of battle, such grief hath been ours that one cannot gladden us by giving the sovereignty of even the 3 worlds. Alas, having slain, for the sake of the earth, such lords of earth as deserved not to be slain by us, we are bearing the weight of existence, deprived of friends and reft of the very objects of life. Like a pack of dogs fighting one another for a piece of meat, a great disaster has overtaken us. That piece of meat is no longer dear to us. On the other hand, it shall be thrown aside. They that have been slain should not have been slain for the sake of even the whole earth or mountains of gold, or all the horses and kine in this world. Filled with envy and hankering for all earthly objects, and influenced by wrath and pleasure, all of them, betaking themselves to the highway of death, have repaired to the regions of the armor, practicing asceticism and brahmacharya and truth and renunciation. Sires wish for sons endued with every kind of prosperity. Similarly, by fasts and sacrifices and vows and sacred rites and auspicious ceremonies mothers conceive. They then hold the fetus for 10 months. Passing their time in misery and in expectation of fruit, they always ask themselves in anxiety, shall these come out of the womb safely? Shall these live after birth? Shall they grow in might and be objects of regard on earth? Shall they be able to give us happiness in this and the other world? Alas, since their sons, youthful in years and resplendent with earrings, have been slain, therefore, those expectations of theirs rendered fruitless, have been abandoned by them. Without having enjoyed the pleasure of this world, and without having paid off the debts they owed to the sires and the gods, they have repaired to Yama's abode. Alas, O mother, those kings have been slain just at that time when their parents expected to reap the fruits of their might and wealth. 5. They were always fitted with envy and a hankering after earthly objects, and were exceedingly subject to anger and joy. For this, they could not be expected to enjoy at any time or any place the fruits of victory. 6. I think that they among the Panchalas and the Kuras that have fallen in this battle have been lost, otherwise he that has slain would, by that act of his, obtain all regions of bliss. 7. We are regarded as the cause of the destruction that has overtaken the world. The fault, however, is really ascribable to the sons of Dhritarashtra. Duryodhana's heart was always set upon guile. Always cherishing malice, he was addicted to deception. Although we never offended him, yet he always behaved falsely towards us. We have not gained our object, nor have they gained theirs. We have not vanquished them, nor have they vanquished us. The Dhritarashtras could not enjoy this earth, nor could they enjoy women and music. They did not listen to the counsels of ministers and friends and men learned in the scriptures. They could not, indeed, enjoy their costly gems and well-filled treasury and vast territories. Burning with the hate they bore us, they could not obtain happiness and peace. Beholding our aggrandizement, Duryodhana became colourless, pale and emaciated. Shivala's son informed King Dhritarashtra of this. As a further full of affection for his son, Dhritarashtra tolerated the evil policy his son pursued. Without doubt, by disregarding Vidura and the high-souled son of Ganga, and in consequence of his neglect in restraining his wicked and covetous son, entirely governed by his passions, the king has met with destruction like my poor self. Without doubt, Sayadana, having caused his uterine brothers to be slain and having cast this couple into burning grief, hath fallen off from his blazing fame. Burning with the hate he bore to us, Duryodhana was always of a sinful heart. What other kinsman of high birth could use such language towards kinsman as he, from desire of battle, actually used in the presence of Krishna? We also have, through Duryodhana's fault, been lost for eternity, like suns burning everything around them with their own energy. That wicked soul white, that embodiment of hostility, was our evil star. Alas, for Duryodhana's acts alone, this race of ours has been exterminated. Having slain those whom we should never have slain, we have incurred the censures of the world. King Dhritarashtra, having installed that wicked suit prince of sinful deeds, that exterminator of his race, in the sovereignty, is obliged to grieve today. Our heroic foes have been slain. We have committed sin. His possessions and kingdom are gone. Having slain them, our wrath had been pacified. But grief is stupefying me. O Dhananjaya, a perpetrated sin is expiated by auspicious acts, by publishing it wildly, by repentance, by almsgiving, by penances, by trips to tirthas after renunciation of everything, by constant meditation on the scriptures. Of all these, He that has practiced renunciation is believed to be incapable of committing sins anew. The Srutis declare that he that practices renunciation escapes from birth and death, and obtaining the right road, that person of fixed soul attains to Brahma. I shall, therefore, O Dhananjaya, go to the woods, with your leave, O scorcher of foes, disregarding all the pairs of opposites, adopting the vow of taciturnity, and walking in the way pointed out by knowledge. 8. O slayer of foes, the Srutis declare it, and I myself have seen it with my eyes, that one who is wedded to this earth can never obtain every kind of religious merit. Desirous of obtaining the things of this earth, I have committed sin, through which, as the Srutis declare, birth and death are brought about. Abandoning the whole of my kingdom, therefore, and the things of this earth, I shall go to the woods, escaping from the ties of the world, freed from grief, and without affection for anything. Do thou govern this earth, on which peace had been restored, and which has been divested of all its thorns. O best of Kuru's race, I have no need for kingdom or for pleasure. Having said these words, King Yudhishthira that just stopped. His younger brother Arjuna then addressed him in the following words. Section 8. Vaisampayana said, like a person unwilling to forgive an insult, Arjuna of keen speech and prowess, and possessed of energy, betraying great fierceness and licking the corners of his mouth, said these words of grave import, smiling the while, Oh, how painful, how distressing! I grieve to see this great agitation of thy heart, since having achieved such a superhuman feat, thou art bent upon forsaking this great prosperity. Having slain thy foes, and having acquired the sovereignty of the earth which has been won through observance of the duties of thy own order, why shouldst thou abandon everything through fickleness of heart? Where on earth hath the eunuch or a person of procrastination ever acquired sovereignty? Why then didst thou, insensate with rage, slay all the kings of the earth? He that would live by mendicancy, cannot, by any act of his, enjoy the good things of the earth. Divested of prosperity and without resources, he can never win fame on earth or acquire sons and animals. If, O king, abandoning this swelling kingdom, thou livest in the observance of the wretched mode of life led by a mendicant, what will the world say of thee? Why dost thou say that abandoning all the good things of the earth, divested of prosperity, and reft of resources, thou wilt lead a life of mendicancy like a vulgar person? Thou art born in this race of kings. Having won by conquest the whole earth, wishest thou from folly to live in the woods after abandoning everything of virtue and profit? If thou retirest into the woods, in thy absence, dishonest men will destroy sacrifices. That sin will certainly pollute thee. King Nuashah, having done many wicked acts in a state of poverty, cried fie on that state and said that poverty is for recluses. Making no provision for the morrow is a practice that suits rishis. Thou knowest this well. That, however, which has been called the religion of royalty depends entirely on wealth. One who robs another of wealth, robs him of his religion as well. 9. Who amongst us, therefore, O king, would forgive an act of spoliation that is practiced on us? It is seen that a poor man, even when he stands near, is accused falsely. Poverty is a state of sinfulness. It behoveth thee not to applaud poverty, therefore. The man that is fallen, O king, grieveth, as also he that is poor. I do not see the difference between a fallen man and a poor man. All kinds of meritorious acts flow from the possession of great wealth like a mountain. From wealth spring all religious acts, all pleasures, and heaven itself, O king. Without wealth, a man cannot find the very means of sustaining his life. The acts of a person who, possessed of little intelligence, suffers himself to be divested of wealth, are all dried up like shallow streams in the summer season. He that has wealth has friends. He that has wealth has kinsmen. He that has wealth is regarded as a true man in the world. He that has wealth is regarded as a learned man. If a person who hath no wealth desires to achieve a particular purpose, he meets with failure. Wealth brings about accessions of wealth, like elephants capturing wild elephants. Religious acts, pleasures, joy, courage, wrath, learning, and sense of dignity, all these proceed from wealth, O king. From wealth one acquires family honor. From wealth, one's religious merit increases. He that is without wealth hath neither this world, nor the next, O best of men. The man that hath no wealth succeeds not in performing religious acts, for these latter spring from wealth, like rivers from a mountain. He that is lean in respect of his possession of steeds and kine and servants and guests, is truly lean, and not he whose limbs alone are so. Judge truly, O king, and look at the conduct of the gods and the Danavas. O king, do the gods ever wish for anything else than the slaughter of their kinsmen, the Asuras? If the appropriation of wealth belonging to others be not regarded as righteous, how, O monarch, will kings practice virtue on this earth? Learned men have, in the Vedas, laid down this conclusion. The learned have laid it down that kings should live, reciting every day the 3 Vedas, seeking to acquire wealth, and carefully performing sacrifices with the wealth thus acquired. The gods, through internecine quarrels, have obtained footing in heaven. When the very gods have won their prosperity through internecine quarrels, what fault can there be in such quarrels? The gods, thou sayest, act in this way. The eternal precepts of the Vedas also sanction it. To learn, teach, sacrifice, and assist at others' sacrifices, these are our principal duties. The wealth that kings take from others becomes the means of their prosperity. We never see wealth that has been earned without doing some injury to others. It is even thus that kings conquer this world. Having conquered, they call that wealth theirs, just as sons speak of the wealth of their sires as their own. The royal sages that have gone to heaven have declared this to be the duty of kings. Like water flowing on every direction from a swollen ocean, that wealth runs on every direction from the treasuries of kings. This earth formerly belonged to kings Dilipa, Nuasha, Amvarisha, and Mandatory. She now belongs to thee. A great sacrifice, therefore, with profuse presents of every kind and requiring a vast heap of the earth's produce, awaits thee. If thou dost not perform that sacrifice, O king, then the sins of this kingdom shall all be thine. Those subjects whose king performs a horse sacrifice with profuse presents become all cleansed and sanctified by beholding the ablutions at the end of the sacrifice. Mahadeva himself, of universal form, in a great sacrifice requiring libations of all kinds of flesh, poured all creatures as sacrificial libations and then his own self. Eternal is this auspicious path. Its fruits are never destroyed. This is the great path called Dasaratha. Abandoning it, O king, to what other path wouldst thou betake thyself? Section 9. Yudhishthira said, for a little while, O Arjuna, concentrate thy attention and fix thy mind and hearing on thy inner soul. If thou listenest to my words in such a frame of mind, they will meet with thy approbation. Abandoning all worldly pleasures, I shall betake myself to that path which is trod by the righteous. I shall not, for thy sake, tread along the path thou recommendest. If thou askest me what path is auspicious that one should tread alone, I shall tell thee. If thou dost not desire to ask me, I shall yet, unasked by thee, tell thee of it. Abandoning the pleasures and observance of men of the world, engaged in performing the austerest of penances, I shall wander in the forest, with the animals that have their home there, living on fruit and roots. Pouring libations on the fire at due hours, and performing ablutions at morn and eve, I shall thin myself by reduced diet, and covering myself with skins, bear matted locks on my head. Enduring cold, wind, and heat, as also hunger and thirst and toil, I shall emaciate my body by penances as laid down in the ordinance. Charming to the heart and the ear, I shall daily listen to the clear strains of cheerful birds and animals residing in the woods. I shall enjoy the fragrance of flower-burthen trees and creepers, and see diverse kinds of charming products that grow in the forest. I shall also see many excellent recluses of the forest. I shall not do the slightest injury to any creature. What need be said then of those that dwell in villages and towns? 10. Leading a retired life and devoting myself to contemplation, I shall live upon ripe and unripe fruits, and gratify the biteress and the deities with offerings of wild fruits and spring water and grateful hymns. Observing in this way the austere regulations of a forest life, I shall pass my days, calmly awaiting the dissolution of my body. Or, living alone and observing the vow of taciturnity, with my head shaved clean, I shall derive my sustenance by begging each day of only one tree. 11. Smearing my body with ashes, and availing of the shelter of abandoned houses, or lying at the foot of trees, I shall live, casting off all things dear or hateful, without indulging in grief or joy, and regarding censure and applause, hope and affliction, equally, and prevailing over every couple of opposites. I shall live casting off all the things of the world. Without conversing with anybody, I shall assume the outward form of a blind and deaf idiot, while living in contentment and deriving happiness from my own soul. Without doing the least injury to the four kinds of movable and immovable creatures, I shall behave equally towards all creatures, whether mindful of their duties or following only the dictates of the senses. I shall not jeer at anyone, nor shall I frown at anybody. Restraining all my senses, I shall always be with a cheerful face. Without asking anybody about the way, proceeding along any route that I may happen to meet with, I shall go on, without taking note of the country or the point of the compass to which or towards which I may go. Regardless of whither I may proceed, I shall not look behind. Divesting myself of desire and wrath, and turning my gaze inwards, I shall go on, casting off pride of soul and body. Nature always walks ahead, hence, food and drink will somehow be accomplished. I shall not think of those pairs of opposites that stand in the way of such a life. If pure food in even a small measure be not obtainable in the first house to which I may go, I shall get it by going to other houses. If I fail to procure it by even such a round, I shall proceed to 7 houses in succession and fill my craving. When the smoke of houses will cease, their hearth fires having been extinguished, when husking rods will be kept aside, and all the inmates will have taken their food, when mendicants and guests will cease to wander, I shall select a moment for my round of mendicancy and solicit alms at 2, 3, or 5 houses at the most. I shall wander over the earth, after breaking the bonds of desire. Preserving equability in success and failure, I shall learn great ascetic merit. I shall behave neither like one that is fond of life nor like one that is about to die. I shall not manifest any liking for life or dislike for death. If one strikes off one arm of mine and another smears the other arm with sandal paste, I shall not wish evil to the one nor good to the other. Discarding all those acts conducive to prosperity that one can do in life, the only acts I shall perform will be to open and shut my eyes and take as much food and drink as will barely keep up life. Without ever being attached to action, and always restraining the functions of the senses, I shall give up all desires and purify the soul of all impurities. Freed from all attachments and tearing off all bonds and ties, I shall live the free as the wind. Living in such freedom from affections, everlasting contentment will be mine. Through desire, I have, from ignorance, committed great sins. A certain class of men, doing both auspicious and inauspicious acts here, maintain their wives, children, and kinsmen, all bound to them in relations of cause and effect. 12. When the period of their life runs out, casting off their weakened bodies, they take upon themselves all the effects of their sinful acts, for none but the actor is burdened with the consequences of his acts. 13. Even thus, endued with actions, creatures come into this wheel of life that is continually turning like the wheel of the car, and even thus, coming thither, they meet with their fellow creatures. He, however, who abandons the worldly course of life, which is really a fleeting illusion although it looks eternal, and which is afflicted by birth, death, decrepitude, disease, and pain, is sure to obtain happiness. When again, the very gods fall down from heaven and great rishis from their respective positions of eminence, who that is acquainted with truths of causes and effects, would wish to have even heavenly prosperity. 14. Insignificant kings, having performed diverse acts relating to the diverse means of kingcraft, known by the means of conciliation, gift, and see, often slay a king through some contrivance. Reflecting on these circumstances, this nectar of wisdom hath come to me. Having attained it, I desire to get a permanent, eternal, and unchangeable place for myself. Always conducting myself with such wisdom and acting in this way, I shall, by betaking myself to that fearless path of life, terminate this physical frame that is subject to birth, death, decrepitude, disease, and pain. Section X. Bhimsana said, "Thy understanding, O king, has become blind to the truth, like that of a foolish and unintelligent reciter of the Veda in consequence of his repeated recitation of those scriptures. If censuring the duties of kings thou wouldest lead a life of idleness, then, O bull of Bharata's race, this destruction of the Dhritarashtras was perfectly uncalled for. Are forgiveness and compassion and pity and abstention from injury not to be found in anybody walking along the path of Kshatriya duties? If we knew that this was thy intention, we would then have never taken up arms and slain a single creature. We would then have lived by mendicancy till the destruction of this body. This terrible battle between the rulers of the earth would also have never taken place. The learned have said this: all that we see is food for the strong. Indeed, this mobile and immobile world is an object of enjoyment for the person that is strong. Wise men acquainted with Kshatriya duties have declared that they who stand in the way of the person taking the sovereignty of the earth should be slain. Guilty of that fault, those that stood as enemies of our kingdom have all been slain by us. Having slain them, O Yudhishthira, righteously govern this earth. This our act, in refusing the kingdom, is like that of a person who, having dug a well, stops in his work before obtaining water and comes up smetted with mire. Or, this our act is like that of a person who, having climbed up a tall tree and taken honey therefrom, meets with death before tasting it. Or, it is like that of a person who, having set out on a long way, comes back in despair without having reached his destination. Or, it is like that of a person who, having slain all his foes, O thou of Kuru's race, at last falls by his own hand. Or, it is like that of a person afflicted with hunger, who, having obtained food, refuses to take it. Or of a person under the influence of desire, who, having obtained a woman reciprocating his passion, refuses to meet with her. We have become objects of censure, O Bharata, because, O king, we follow thee that art of feeble understanding, in consequence of thyself being our eldest brother. We are possessed of mighty arms, we are accomplished in knowledge and endued with great energy. Yet we are obedient to the words of a eunuch as if we were entirely helpless. We are the refuge of all helpless persons. Yet, when people see us so, why would they not say that in respect of the acquisition of our objects we are entirely powerless? Reflect on this that I say. it has been laid down that a life of renunciation should be adopted only in times of distress, by kings overcome with decrepitude or defeated by foes. Men of wisdom, therefore, do not applaud renunciation as the duty of a kshatriya. On the other hand, they that are of clear sight think that the adoption of that course of life by a kshatriya involves even the loss of virtue. How can those that have sprung from that order, that are devoted to the practices of that order, and that have refuge in them, censure those duties? Indeed, if those duties be censurable, then why should not the Supreme Ordainer be censured? 15. It is only those persons that are reft of prosperity and wealth and that are infidels in faith, that have promulgated this precept of the Vedas, about the propriety of a kshatriya's adoption of a life of renunciation, as the truth. In reality, however, it is never proper for a kshatriya to do so. He who is competent to support life by prowess, he who can support himself by his own exertions, does not live, but really falls away from his duty, by the hypocritical externals of a life of renunciation. That man only is capable of leading a solitary life of happiness in the woods who is unable to support sons and grandsons and the deities and rishis and guests and pitras. As the deer and boars and birds, though they lead a forest life, cannot attain to heaven, even so those kshatriyas that are not bereft of prowess yet not given to doing good turns cannot attain to heaven by leading only a forest life. They should acquire religious merit by other ways. If, O king, anybody were to obtain success from renunciation, then mountains and trees would surely obtain it. These latter are always seen to lead lives of renunciation. They do not injure anyone. They are, again, always aloof from a life of worldliness and are all Brahmacarins. If it be the truth that a person's success depends upon his own lot in life and not upon that of other, then, as a person born in the kshatriya order, thou shouldst betake thyself to action. He that is reft of action can never have success. If they that fill only their own stomachs could attain to success, then all aquatic creatures would obtain it, for these have none else to support save their own selves. Behold, the world moves on, with every creature on it employed in acts proper to its nature. Therefore, one should betake oneself to action. The man reft of action can never obtain success. Section 11. Arjuna said, in this connection an old history is cited, viz., the discourse between certain ascetics and Sakra, O bull of Bharata's race. A number of well-born Brahmana youth of little understanding, without the hirsute honours of manhood, abandoning their homes, came to the woods for leading a forest life. Regarding that to be virtue, those youths of abundant resources became desirous of living as Brahmacarins, having abandoned their brothers and sires. It so happened that Indra became compassionate towards them. Assuming the form of a golden bird, the holy Sakra addressed them, saying, that which is done by persons that eat the remnants of a sacrifice is the most difficult of acts that men can achieve. 16. Such an act is highly meritorious. The lives of such men are worthy of every praise. Having attained the object of life, those men, devoted to virtue, obtain the highest end. Hearing these words, the rishis said, Lo, this bird applauds those that subsist upon the remnants of sacrifices. He informs us of it, for we live upon such remnants. The bird then said, I do not applaud you. Ye are stationed with Maya and very impure. Living upon offals, ye are wicked. Ye are not persons subsisting upon the remnants of sacrifice. The rishis said, we regard this a course of life to be highly blessed. Tell us, O bird, what is for our good. Thy words inspire us with great faith. The bird said, if you do not refuse me your faith by arraying yourselves against your better selves, then I shall tell you words that are true and beneficial. The rishis said, we shall listen to thy words, O sire. for the different paths are all known to thee. O thou of righteous soul, we desire also to obey thy commands. Instruct us now. The bird said, among quadruped the cow is the foremost. Of metals, gold is the foremost. Of words, mantras, and of bipeds, the brahmanas, are the foremost. These mantras regulate all the rites of a brahmana's life, beginning with those appertaining to birth and the period after it, and ending with those appertaining to death and the crematorium. These Vedic rites are his heaven, path, and foremost of sacrifices. If it were otherwise, how could I find the acts of persons in quest of heaven become successful through mantras? He who, in this world, adores his soul, firmly regarding it to be a deity of a particular kind, obtains success consistent with the nature of that particular deity. 17. The seasons measured by half the months lead to the sun, the moon, or the stars. 18. These three kinds of success, depending upon action, are desired by every creature. The domestic mode of life is very superior and sacred and is called the field for the cultivation of success. By what path do those men go that censure action? Of little understanding and deprived of wealth, they incur sin. And since those men of little understanding live by abandoning the eternal paths of the gods, the paths of the rishis, and the paths of Brahma, therefore, they attain to paths disapproved of by the Srutis. 19. There is an ordinance in the mantras which says, Ye sacrificer, perform the sacrifice represented by gifts of valuable things. I wilt give thee happiness represented by sons, animals, and heaven. To live, therefore, in accordance with ordinance is said to be the highest asceticism of the ascetics. Therefore, ye should perform such sacrifices and such penances in the shape of gifts. The due performance of these eternal duties, viz., their worship of the gods, the study of the Vedas, and the gratification of the Pitris, as also regardful services unto the preceptors, these are called the ostrest of penances. The gods, by performing such exceedingly difficult penances, have obtained the highest glory and power. I, therefore, tell you to bear the very heavy burthen of the duties of domesticity. Without doubt, penances are the foremost of all things and are the root of all creatures. Asceticism, however, is to be obtained by leading a life of domesticity, upon which depends everything. They that eat the remnants of feasts, after duly apportioning the food morning and evening among kinsmen, attain to ends that are exceedingly difficult of attainment. They are called eater of the remnants of feasts who eat after having served guests and gods and rishis and kinsmen. Therefore, those persons that are observant of their own duties, that practice excellent vows and are truthful in speech, become objects of great respect in the world, with their own faith exceedingly strengthened. Free from pride, those achievers of the most difficult feats attain to heaven and live for unending time in the regions of Sakra. Arjuna continued, those ascetics then, hearing these words that were beneficial and fraught with righteousness, abandoned the religion of renunciation, saying, there is nothing in it, and betook themselves to a life of domesticity. Therefore, O thou that art conversant with righteousness, calling to thy aid that eternal wisdom, rule the wide world, O monarch that is now destitute of foes. Section 12. Vaisampayana said, hearing these words of Arjuna, O chastiser of foes, Nakula of mighty arms and a broad chest, temperate in speech and possessed of great wisdom, with face whose colour then resembled that of copper, looked at the king, that foremost of all righteous persons, and spoke these words, besieging his brother's heart, with reason. Nakula said, the very gods had established their fires in the region called Visakayupa. Know, therefore, O king, that the gods themselves depend upon the fruits of action. 20. The Pitris, that support, by rain, the lives of even all disbelievers, observing the ordinances of the Creator as declared in the Vedas, are, O king, engaged in action. 21. Know them for downright atheists that reject the declaration of the Vedas, which inculcate action. The person that is learned in the Vedas, by following their declarations in all his acts, attains, O Bharata, to the highest region of heaven by the way of the deities. 22. This domestic mode of life again has been said by all persons acquainted with Vedic truths to be superior to all their other modes of life. Knowing this, O king, that the person who in sacrifices gives away his righteously acquired wealth unto those brahmanas that are well conversant with the Vedas, and restrains his soul, is, O monarch, regarded as the true renouncer. He, however, who, disregarding a life of domesticity, that is, the source of much happiness, jumps to the next mode of life, that renouncer of his own self. 23. O monarch, is a renouncer laboring under the quality of darkness. That man who is homeless, who roves over the world, in his mendicant rounds, who has the foot of a tree for his shelter, who observes the vow of taciturnity, never cooks for himself, and seeks to restrain all the functions of his senses, is, O Partha, a renouncer in the observance of the vow of mendicancy. 24. That Brahmana who, disregarding wrath and joy, and especially deceitfulness, always employs his time in the study of the Vedas, is a renouncer in the observance of the vow of mendicancy. 25. The four different modes of life were at one time weighed in the balance. The wise have said, O king, that when domesticity was placed on one scale, it required the three others to be placed on the other for balancing it. Beholding the result of this examination by scales, O Partha, and seeing further, O Bharata, that domesticity alone contained both heaven and pleasure, that became the way of the great rishis and the refuge of all persons conversant with the ways of the world. He, therefore, O bull of Bharata's race, who betakes himself to this mode of life, thinking it to be his duty and abandoning all desire for fruit, is a real renouncer, and not that man of clouded understanding who goes to the woods, abandoning home and its surroundings. A person, again, who under the hypocritical garb of righteousness, fails to forget his desires, even while living in the woods, is bound by the grim king of death with his deadly fetters round the neck. Those acts that are done from vanity are said to be unproductive of fruit. Those acts, on the other hand, O monarch, that are done from a spirit of renunciation, always bear abundant fruits. 26. Tranquility, self-restraint, fortitude, truth, purity, simplicity, sacrifices, perseverance, and righteousness, these are always regarded as virtues recommended by the rishis. In domesticity, it is said, are acts intended for Pitras, gods, guests. In this mode of life alone, O monarch, are the threefold aims to be attained. 27. The renouncer that rigidly adheres to this mode of life, in which one is free to do all acts, has not to encounter ruin either here or hereafter. The sinless Lord of all creatures, of righteous soul, created creatures, with the intention that they would adore him by sacrifices with profuse presents. Creepers and trees and deciduous herbs, and animals that are clean, and clarified butter, were created as ingredients of sacrifice. For one, in the observance of domesticity, the performance of sacrifice is fraught with impediments. For this, that mode of life has been said to be exceedingly difficult and unattainable. Those persons, therefore, in the observance of the domestic mode of life, who, possessed of wealth and corn and animals, do not perform sacrifices, earn, O monarch, eternal sin. Amongst rishis, there are some that regard the study of the Vedas to be a sacrifice, and some that regard contemplation to be a great sacrifice which they perform in their minds. The very gods, O monarch, covet the companionship of a regenerate person like this. who in consequence of his dreading along such a way which consists in the concentration of the mind, has become equal to Brahma. By refusing to spend in sacrifice the diverse kinds of wealth that thou hast taken from thy foes, thou art only displaying thy want of faith. I have never seen, O monarch, a king in the observance of a life of domesticity renouncing his wealth in any other way except in the Rajasuya, the Aswamedha, and other kinds of sacrifice. Like Sakra, the chief of the celestial, O sire, perform those other sacrifices that are praised by the Brahmanas. That king, through whose heedlessness the subjects are plunged by robbers, and who does not offer protection to those whom he is called upon to govern, is said to be the very embodiment of Kali. If, without giving away steeds, and kine, and female slaves, and elephants adorned with trappings, and villages, and populous regions, and fields, and houses, and to Brahmanas, we retire into the woods with hearts not harbouring friendly feeling towards kinsmen, even we shall be, O monarch, such callous of the kingly order. Those members of the kingly order that do not practice charity and give protection to others, incur sin. Woe is their portion hereafter and not bliss. If, O Lord, without performing great sacrifices and the rites in honour of thy deceased ancestors, and if, without bathing in sacred waters, thou betakest thyself to a wandering life, thou shalt then meet with destruction like a small cloud separated from a mass and dashed by the winds. Thou shalt then fall off from both worlds and have to take thy birth in the Pisucha order. 28. A person becomes a true renouncer by casting off every internal and external attachment, and not simply by abandoning home for dwelling in the woods. A Brahmana that lives in the observance of these ordinances in which there are no impediments, does not fall off from this or the other world. Observant of the duties of one's own order, duties respected by the ancients and practiced by the best of men, who is there, O Patha, that would grieve, O king, for having in a trice slain in battle his foes that swelled with prosperity, like Sakra slaying the forces of the Daityas. Having in the observance of Kshatriya duties subjugated the world by the aid of thy prowess, and having made presents unto persons conversant with the Vedas, thou canst, O monarch, go to regions higher than heaven. It behoves thee not, O Patha, to indulge in grief. Section 13. Sahadeva said, by casting off all external objects only, O Bharata, one does not attain to success. By casting off even mental attachments, the attainment of success is doubtful. 29. Let that religious merit and that happiness which are his who has cast off external objects but whose mind still internally covets them, be the portion of our foes. On the other hand, let that religious merit and that happiness which are his who governs the earth, having cast off all internal attachments also, be the portion of our friends. The word mama, mine, consisting of 2 letters, is death's self, while the opposite word namama, not mine, consisting of 3 letters, is eternal Brahma. 30. Brahma and death, O king, entering invisibly into every soul, without doubt, cause all creatures to act. If this being, O Bharata, that is called soul, be not ever subject to destruction, then by destroying the bodies of creatures one cannot be guilty of slaughter. If, on the other hand, the soul and the body of a being are born or destroyed together, so that when the body is destroyed the soul also is destroyed, then the way, prescribed in the scriptures, of rites and acts would be futile. Therefore, driving away all doubts about the immortality of the soul, the man of intelligence should adopt that path which has been trodden by the righteous of old and older times. The life of that king is certainly fruitless who, having acquired the entire earth with her mobile and immobile creatures, does not enjoy her. As regards the man again who lives in the forest upon wild fruits and roots, but whose attachment to things of the earth has not ceased, such a one, O king, lives within the jaws of death. Behold, O Bharata, the hearts and the outward forms of all creatures to be but manifestations of thy own. They that look upon all creatures as their own selves escape from the great fear of destruction. 31. Thou art my sire, thou art my protector, thou art my brother, and thou art my senior and preceptor. It behoveth thee, therefore, to forgive these incoherent utterances in sorrow of a woe-stricken person. True or false, this that has been uttered by me, O Lord of earth, has been uttered from a due regard for thee, O best of Bharatas, that I entertain. Section 14. Vaisampayana said, when Kunti's son, King Yudhishthira the Just, remained speechless after listening to his brothers who were telling these truths of the Vedas, that foremost of women, viz., Draupadi, of large eyes and great beauty, and noble descent, O monarch, said these words unto that bull among kings seated in the midst of his brothers that resembled so many lions and tigers, and like the leader in the midst of a herd of elephants. Ever expectant of loving regards from all her husbands but especially from Yudhishthira, she was always treated with affection and indulgence by the king. Conversant with duties and observant of them in practice, that lady of large hips, casting her eyes on her lord, desired his attention in soothing and sweet words and said as follows. Draupadi said, these thy brothers, O Partha, were crying and drying their palates like shatakas, but thou dost not gladden them. O monarch, gladden these thy brothers, that resemble infuriated elephants, in prowess, with proper words, these heroes that have always drunk of the cup of misery. Why, O king, while living by the side of the Dwaita lake, didst thou say unto these thy brothers then residing with thee, and suffering from cold and wind and sun, even these words, viz. Rushing to battle from desire of victory, we will slay Duryodhana and enjoy the earth that is capable of granting every wish. Depriving great car warriors of their cars and slaying huge elephants, and strewing the field of battle with the bodies of car warriors and horsemen and heroes, ye chastisers of foes, ye will perform great sacrifices of diverse kinds with presents in profusion. All these sufferings, due to a life of exile in the woods, will then end in happiness. O foremost of all practices of virtue, having thyself said these words unto thy brothers then, why, O hero, dost thou depress our hearts now? A eunuch can never enjoy wealth. A eunuch can never have children even as there can be no fish in Maya, destitute of water. A kshatriya without the rod of chastisement can never shine. A kshatriya without the rod of chastisement can never enjoy the earth. The subjects of a king that is without the rod of chastisement can never have happiness. Friendship for all creatures, charity, study of the Vedas, penances, these constitute the duties of a Brahmana and not of a king, O best of kings. Restraining the wicked, cherishing the honest, and never retreating from battle, these are the highest duties of kings. He is said to be conversant with duties in whom are forgiveness and wrath, giving and taking, terrors and fearlessness, and chastisement and reward. It was not by study, or gift, or mendicancy, that thou hast acquired the earth. That force of the enemy, O hero, ready to burst upon thee with all its might, abounding with elephants and horse and cars, strong with 3 kinds of strength 32, protected by Drona and Karna and Aswatthama and Kripa, has been defeated and slain by thee, O hero. It is for this that I ask thee to enjoy the earth. Formerly, O puissant one, thou hadst, O monarch, swayed with might. 33. The region called Jambu, O tiger among men, abounding with populous districts. Thou hadst also, O ruler of men, swayed with might that other region called Crownshadhipa, situate on the west of the great Meru and equal unto Jambudvipa itself. Thou hadst swayed with might, O king, that other region called Sacred Weeper on the east of the Great Meru and equal to Crowned Hippo itself. The region called Badraswa, on the north of the Great Meru and equal to Sacred Weeper, was also swayed by thee, O tiger, among men. Thou hadst even penetrated the ocean and swayed with might other regions, too, O hero, and the very islands begirt by the sea and containing many populous provinces. Having, O Bharata, achieved such immeasurable feats, and having obtained, through them, the adorations of the Brahmanas, how is it that thy soul is not gratified? Seeing these brothers of thine before thee, O Bharata, these heroes swelling with might and resembling bulls or infuriated elephants, in prowess, why dost thou not address them in delightful words? All of you are like celestials. All of you are capable of resisting foes. All of you are competent to scorch your enemies. If only one of you had become my husband, my happiness would even then have been very great. What need I say then, O tiger among men, when all of you, numbering 5, are my husbands, and look after me, like the 5 senses inspiring the physical frame. The words of my mother-in-law, who is possessed of great knowledge and great foresight, cannot be untrue. Addressing me, she said, O Princess of Panchala, Yudhishthira will ever keep you in happiness, O excellent lady. Having slain many thousands of kings possessed of active prowess, I see, O monarch, that through thy folly thou art about to make that feat futile. They whose eldest brother becomes mad, have all to follow him in madness. Through thy madness, O king, all the Pandavas are about to become mad. If, O monarch, these thy brothers were in their senses, they would then have immured thee with all unbelievers, in a prison, and taken upon themselves the government of the earth. That person who from dullness of intellect acts in this way never succeeds in winning prosperity. The man that treads along the path of madness should be subjected to medical treatment by the aid of incense and galerium, of drugs applied through the nose, and of other medicines. O best of the Bharatas, I am the worst of all my sex, since I desire to live on even though I am bereaved of my children. Thou shouldst not disregard the words spoken by me and by these brothers of thine that are endeavouring thus to dissuade thee from thy purpose. Indeed, abandoning the whole earth, thou art inviting adversity and danger to come upon thee. Thou shinest now, O monarch, even as those 2 best of kings, viz., Mandatory and Amvarisha, regarded by all the lords of earth, did in former days. Protecting thy subjects righteously, govern the goddess earth with her mountains and forests and islands. Do not, O king, become cheerless. Adore the gods in diverse sacrifices. Fight thy foes. Make gifts of wealth and clothes and other objects of enjoyment unto the Brahmanas, O best of kings. Section 15. Vaisampayana said, hearing these words of Yajnasana's daughter, Arjuna once more spoke, showing proper regard for his mighty armed eldest brother of unfading glory. Arjuna said, the man armed with a rod of chastisement governs all subjects and protects them. The rod of chastisement is awake when all else is sleep. For this, the wise have characterized the rod of chastisement to be righteousness itself. The rod of chastisement protects righteousness and profit. It protects also, O king. For this, the rod of chastisement is identified with the triple objects of life. Corn and wealth are both protected by the rod of chastisement. Knowing this, O thou that art possessed of learning, take up the rod of chastisement and observe the course of the world. One class of sinful men desist from sin through fear of the rod of chastisement in the king's hands. Another class desist from similar acts through fear of Yama's rod, and yet another from fear of the next world. Another class of persons desist from sinful acts through fear of society. Thus, O king, in this world, whose course is such, Everything is dependent on the rod of chastisement. There is a class of persons who are restrained by only the rod of chastisement from devouring one another. If the rod of chastisement did not protect people, they would have sunk in the darkness of hell. The rod of chastisement, danda, has been so named by the wise because it restrains the ungovernable and punishes the wicked. The chastisement of Brahmanas should be by word of mouth, of Kshatriyas, by giving them only that much of food as would suffice for the support of life, of Vaisyas, by the imposition of fines and forfeitures of property, while for Sudras there is no punishment. 34. For keeping men awake to their duties, and for the protection of property, ordinances, O king, have been established in the world, under the name of chastisement, or punitive legislation. Thither where chastisement, of dark complexion and red eyes, stands in an attitude of readiness to grapple with every offender, and the king is of righteous vision, the subjects never forget themselves. The Brahmacharin and the householder, the recluse in the forest and the religious mendicant, all these walk in their respective ways through fear of chastisement alone. He that is without any fear, O king, never performs a sacrifice. He that is without fear never giveth away. The man that is without any fear and never desires to adhere to any engagement or compact. Without piercing the vitals of others, without achieving the most difficult feats, and without staying creatures like a fisherman, slaying fish, no person can obtain great prosperity. 35. Without slaughter, no man has been able to achieve fame in this world or acquire wealth or subjects. Indra himself, by the slaughter of Vritra, became the great Indra. Those amongst the gods that are given to slaughtering others are adored much more by men. Rudra, Skanda, Sakra, Agni, Varuna, are all slaughterers. Kala and Mritu and Vayu and Kuvara and Surya, the Vasas, the Maruts, the Sadhyas, and the Viswadevas, O Bharata, are all slaughterers. Humbled by their prowess, all people bend to those gods, but not to Brahman or Datri or Pushan at any time. Only a few men that are noble of disposition adore in all their acts those among the gods that are equally disposed towards all creatures and that are self-restrained and peaceful. I do not behold the creature in this world that supports life without doing any act of injury to others. Animals live upon animals, the stronger upon the weaker. The mongoose devours mice, the cat devours the mongoose, the dog devours the cat, the dog again is devoured by the spotted leopard. Behold, all things again are devoured by the destroyer when he comes. This mobile and immobile universe is food for living creatures. This has been ordained by the gods. The man of knowledge, therefore, is never stupefied at it. It behoveth thee, O great king, to become that which thou art by birth. Foolish Kshatriyas, alone, restraining wrath and joy, take refuge in the woods. The very ascetics cannot support their lives without killing creatures. In water, on earth, and fruits, there are innumerable creatures. It is not true that one does not slaughter them. What higher duty is there than supporting one's life? 36. There are many creatures that are so minute that their existence can only be inferred. With the falling of the eyelids alone, they are destroyed. There are men who, subduing wrath and pride, betake themselves to ascetic courses of life and, leaving village and towns, repair to the woods. Arrived there, those men may be seen to be so stupefied as to adopt the domestic mode of life once more. Others may be seen who, in the observance of domesticity, tilling the soil, uprooting herbs, cutting off trees and killing birds and animals, perform sacrifices and at last attain to heaven. O son of Kunti, I have no doubt in this that the acts of all creatures become crowned with success only when the policy of chastisement is properly applied. If chastisement were abolished from the world, creatures would soon be destroyed. Like fishes in the water, stronger animals prey on the weaker. This truth was formerly spoken by Brahmana himself, viz., that chastisement, properly applied, upholds creatures. Behold, the very fires, when extinguished, blaze up again, in fright, when blown. This is due to the fear of force or chastisement. If there were no chastisement in the world distinguishing the good from the bad, then the whole world would have been enveloped in utter darkness and all things would have been confounded. Even they that are breakers of rules, that are atheists and scoffers of the Vedas, afflicted by chastisement, soon become disposed to observe rules and restrictions. 37. Everyone in this world is kept straight by chastisement. A person naturally pure and righteous is scarce. Yielding to the fear of chastisement, man becomes disposed to observe rules and restraints. Chastisement was ordained by the Creator himself for protecting religion and profit, for the happiness of all the four orders, and for making them righteous and modest. If chastisement could not inspire fear, then ravens and beasts of prey would have eaten up all other animals and men and the clarified butter intended for sacrifice. If chastisement did not uphold and protect, then nobody would have studied the Vedas, nobody would have milked a milch cow, and no maiden would have married. 38. If chastisement did not uphold and protect, then ravage and confusion would have set in on every side, and all barriers would have been swept away, and the idea of property would have disappeared. If chastisement did not uphold and protect, people could never duly perform annual sacrifices with large presents. If chastisement did not uphold and protect, no one, to whatever mode of life he might belong, would observe the duties of that mode as declared in the scriptures, and no one would have succeeded in acquiring knowledge. 39. Neither camels, nor oxen, nor horses, nor mules, nor asses, would, even if yoked thereto, drag cars and carriages, if chastisement did not uphold and protect. Upon chastisement depend all creatures. The learned, therefore, say that chastisement is the root of everything. Upon chastisement rests the heaven that men desire, and upon it rests this world also. If therefore destroying chastisement is well applied, no sin, no deception, and no wickedness is to be seen. If the rod of chastisement be not uplifted, the dog will lick the sacrificial butter. The crow also would take away the first sacrificial offering, if that rod were not kept uplifted. Righteously or unrighteously, this kingdom hath now become ours. Our duty now is to abandon grief. Do thou, therefore, enjoy it and perform sacrifices. Men that are fortunate, living with their dear wives and children, eat good food, wear excellent clothes, and cheerfully acquire virtue. All our acts, without doubt, are dependent on wealth. That wealth again is dependent on chastisement. Behold, therefore, the importance of chastisement. Duties have been declared for only the maintenance of the relations of the world. There are two things here, viz., abstention from injury and injury prompted by righteous motives. Of these two, that is superior by which righteousness may be acquired. 40. There is no act that is wholly meritorious, nor any that is wholly wicked. Right or wrong, in all acts, something of both is seen. Subjecting animals to castration, their horns again are cut off. They are then made to bear weights, are tethered, and chastised. In this world that is unsubstantial and rotten with abuses and rendered painful, O monarch, do thou practice the ancient customs of men, following the rules and analogy cited above. Perform sacrifices, give alms, protect thy subjects, and practice righteousness. Slay thy foes, O son of Kunti, and protect thy friends. Let no cheerlessness be thine, O king, while slaying foes. He that does it, O Bharata, does not incur the slightest sin. He that takes up a weapon and slays an armed foe advancing against him, does not incur the sin of killing a fetus, for it is the wrath of the advancing foe that provokes the wrath of the slayer. The inner soul of every creature is incapable of being slain. When the soul is incapable of being slain, how then can one be slain by another? As a person enters a new house, even so a creature enters successive bodies. Abandoning forms that are worn out, a creature acquires new forms. People capable of seeing the truth regard this transformation to be death. Section 16. Vaisampayana said, after the conclusion of Arjuna's speech, Bhimasena of great wrath and energy, mustering all his patience, said these words unto his eldest brother, Thou art, O monarch, conversant with all duties. There is nothing unknown to thee. We always wish to imitate thy conduct, but, alas, we cannot do it! I will not say anything. I will not say anything! Even this is what I had wished. Impelled, however, by great grief I am constrained to say something. Listen to these words of mine, O ruler of men. Through the stupefaction of thy faculties, everything is endangered, and ourselves are being made cheerless and weak. How is it that thou that art the ruler of the world, thou that art conversant with all branches of knowledge, sufferest thy understanding to be clouded, in consequence of cheerlessness, like a coward? The righteous and unrighteous paths of the world are known to thee. There is nothing belonging either to the future or the present that is also unknown to thee. O puissant one! When such is the case, O monarch, I will indicate, O ruler of men, the reasons in favor of your assuming sovereignty. Listen to me with undivided attention. There are two kinds of diseases, viz., physical and mental. Each springs from the other. None of them can be seen existing independently. Without doubt, mental diseases spring from physical ones. Similarly, physical diseases spring from mental ones. This is the truth. He that indulgeth in regrets on account of past physical or mental woes, reapeth woe from woe and suffereth double woe. Cold, heat, and wind, these three are the attributes of the body. 41. Their existence in harmony is the sign of health. If one of the three prevails over the rest, remedies have been laid down. Cold is checked by heat, and heat is checked by cold. Goodness, passion, and darkness are the three attributes of the mind. The existence of these three in harmony is the sign of mental health. If one of these prevails over the rest, remedies have been prescribed. Grief is checked by joy, and joy is checked by grief. One, living in the present enjoyment of this, wishes to recollect his past woes. Another, living in the present suffering of woe, wishes to recollect his past bliss. Thou, however, wert never sad in grief or glad in bliss. 42. Thou shouldst not, therefore, use thy memory for becoming sad during times of bliss, or glad during times of woe. It seems that destiny is all-powerful. Or, if it be thy nature, in consequence of which thou art thus afflicted, how is it that it does not behove thee to recollect the sight thou sawest before, viz., the scantily clad Krishna dragged, while in her season, before the assembly? 43. Why does it not behove thee to recollect our expulsion from their Kuru city and our exile into the woods, dressed in deerskins, as also are living in the great forests? Why hast thou forgotten the woes inflicted by Jatajura, the battle with Chitrasena, and the distress suffered at the hands of the Sindhu king? Why hast thou forgotten the kick received by the Princess Draupadi from Kikaka while we were living in concealment? A fierce battle, O chastiser of foes, like that which thou hast fought with Bhishma and Drona, is now before thee, to be fought, however, with thy mind alone. Indeed, that battle is now before thee in which there is no need of arrows, of friends, of relatives and kinsmen, but which will have to be fought with thy mind alone. If thou givest up thy life breath before conquering in this battle, then, assuming another body, thou shalt have to fight these very foes again. 44. Therefore, fight that battle this very day, O bull of Bharata's race, disregarding the concerns of thy body, and aided by thy own acts, conquer and identify with thy mind's foe. 45. If thou canst not win that battle, what wilt be thy condition? On the other hand, by winning it, O monarch, thou shalt have attained the great end of life. Applying thy intellect to this, and ascertaining the right and the wrong paths of creatures, follow thou the course adopted by thy sire before thee, and govern properly thy kingdom. By good luck, O king, the sinful Duryodhana hath been slain with all his followers. By good luck, thou too hast attained to the condition of Draupadi's locks. 46. Perform with due rites and profuse presents the horse sacrifice. We are thy servants, O son of Pritha, as also Vasudeva of great energy. Section 17. Yudhishthira said, discontent, heedless attachment to earthly goods, the absence of tranquility, might, folly, vanity, and anxiety affected by these sins, O Bhima, thou covetest sovereignty. Freed from desire, prevailing over joy and grief, and attaining to tranquility, strive thou to be happy. That peerless monarch who will govern this unbounded earth will have but one stomach. Why dost thou, then, applaud this course of life? One's desires, O bull of Bharata's race, are incapable of being filled in a day, or in many months. Desire, which is incapable of gratification, cannot, indeed, be fitted in course of one's whole life. Fire, when fed with fuel, blazeth forth; when not so fed, it is extinguished. Do thou, therefore, extinguish with little food the fire in thy stomach when it appears. He that is bereft of wisdom seeks much food for his stomach. Conquer thy stomach first. Thou shalt then be able to conquer the earth. The earth being conquered, that which is for thy permanent good will then be won by thee. Thou applaudest desires and enjoyments and prosperity. They, however, that have renounced all enjoyments and reduced their bodies by penances, attain to regions of beatitude. The acquisition and preservation of the kingdom is attended with both righteousness and unrighteousness. The desire for them exists in thee. Free thyself, however, from thy great burthens, and adopt renunciation. The tiger, fulfilling one stomach of his, slaughters many animals. Other animals, destitute of strength and moved by covetousness, live upon the tiger's prey. 47. If kings, accepting earthly possessions, practice renunciation, they can never have contentment. Behold the loss of understanding that is noticeable in them. As a matter of fact, however, they who subsist on leaves of trees, or use 2 stones only or their teeth alone for husking their grain, or live upon water only or air alone, succeed in conquering hell. 48. That king who rules this wide and bounded earth, and that person who regards gold and pebbles equally, amongst these two, the latter is said to have attained the object of his life and not the former. Depending, therefore, upon that which is the eternal refuge of joy both here and hereafter, cease thou to act and hope with respect to thy wishes, and cease to bear attachment to them. They that have given up desire and enjoyment have never to grieve. Thou, however, grievest for enjoyments. 49. Discarding desire and enjoyment, thou mayst succeed in liberating thyself from false speech. 50. There are 2 well-known paths for us, viz., the path of the Pitrus and the path of the gods. They that perform sacrifices go by the Pitri path, while they that are for salvation go by the God path. 51. By penances, by Brahmacharya, by study of the Vedas, the great rishis, casting off their bodies, proceeded to regions that are above the power of death. Worldly enjoyments have been styled as bonds. They have also been called action. Liberated from those 2 sins, viz., bonds and action, one attains to the highest end. mention is made of a verse sung of old by Janaka, who was freed from the pairs of opposites, liberated from desire and enjoyments, and observant of the religion of moksha. That verse runs thus: My treasures are immense, yet I have nothing. If again the whole of Mithila were burnt and reduced to ashes, nothing of mine will be burnt. As a person on the hilltop looketh down upon men on the plain below, so he that has got up on the top of the mansion of knowledge seeth people grieving for things that do not call for grief. He, however, that is of foolish understanding, does not see this. He who, casting his eyes on visible things, really seeth them, is said to have eyes and understanding. The faculty called understanding is so called because of the knowledge and comprehension it gives of unknown and incomprehensible things. He who is acquainted with the words of persons that are learned, that are of cleansed souls, and that have attained to a state of Brahma, succeeds in obtaining great honours. When one seeth creatures of infinite diversity to be all one and the same, and to be but diversified emanations from the same essence, one is then said to have attained Brahma. 52. Those who reach this high state of culture attain to that supreme and blissful end, and not they who are without knowledge, or they who are of little and narrow souls, or they who are bereft of understanding, or they who are without penances. Indeed, everything rests on their cultivated understanding. Section 18. Vaisampayana said, when Yudhishthira, after saying these words, became silent, Arjuna, afflicted by that speech of the king, and burning with sorrow and grief, once more addressed his eldest brother, saying, People recite this old history, O Bharata, about the discourse between the ruler of the Vedas and his queen. That history has reference to the words which the grief-stricken spouse of the ruler of the Vedas had said to her lord when the latter, abandoning his kingdom, had resolved to lead a life of mendicancy, casting off wealth and children and wives and precious possessions of various kinds and the established path for acquiring religious merit and fire itself. 53. King Janaka shaved his head, and assumed the garb of a mendicant. His dear spouse beheld him deprived of wealth, installed in the observance of the vow of mendicancy, resolved to abstain from inflicting any kind of injury on others, free from vanity of every kind, and prepared to subsist upon a handful of barley fallen off from the stalk and to be got by picking the grains from crevices in the field. Approaching her lord at a time when no one was with him, the queen, endued with great strength of mind, fearlessly and in wrath, told him these words fraught with reason: Why hast thou adopted a life of mendicancy, abandoning thy kingdom full of wealth and corn? A handful of fallen off barley cannot be proper for thee. Thy resolution tallies not with thy acts. 54. Since abandoning thy large kingdom thou covetest, O king, a handful of grain. With this handful of barley, O king, wilt thou succeed in gratifying thy guests, gods, rishis and Pitris? This thy labour, therefore, is bootless. Alas, abandoned by all these, viz., gods, guests, and Pitris, thou leadest a life of wandering mendicancy, O king, having cast off all action. Thou wert, before this, the supporter of thousands of Brahmanas versed in the 3 Vedas and of many more besides. How canst thou desire to beg of them thy own food today? Abandoning thy blazing prosperity, thou castest thy eyes round like a dog for his food. Thy mother hath today been made sonless by thee, and thy spouse, the princess of Kosla, a widow. These helpless Kshatriyas, expectant of fruit and religious merit, wait upon thee, placing all their hopes on thee. By killing those hopes of theirs, to what regions shalt thou go, O king, especially when salvation is doubtful and creatures are dependent on actions? 55. Sinful as thou art, thou hast neither this world nor the other, since thou wishest to live, having cast off thy wedded wife. 56. Why, indeed, dost thou lead a life of wandering mendicancy, abstaining from all actions, after having abandoned garlands and perfumes and ornaments and robes of diverse kinds? Having been, as it were, a large and sacred lake unto all creatures, having been a mighty tree worthy of adoration and granting its shelter unto all, alas, how canst thou wait upon and worship others? If even an elephant desists from all work, carnivorous creatures coming in packs and innumerable worms would eat it up. What need be said of thyself that art so powerless? 57. How couldst thy heart be set on that mode of life which recommends an earthen pot, and a triple-headed stick, and which forces one to abandon his very clothes, and which permits the acceptance of only a handful of barley after abandonment of everything? If, again, thou sayest that a kingdom and a handful of barley are the same to thee, then why dost thou abandon the former? If, again, a handful of barley becomes an object of attachment with thee, then thy original resolution of abandoning everything falls to the ground. If, again, thou canst act up to thy resolution of abandoning everything, then who am I to thee, who art thou to me, and what can be thy grace to me? 58. If thou best inclined to grace, rule then this earth. They that are desirous of happiness but are very poor and indigent and abandoned by friends may adopt renunciation. But he who imitates those men by abandoning palatial mansions and beds and vehicles and robes and ornaments, acts improperly, indeed. One always accepts gifts made by others, another always makes gifts. Thou knowest the difference between the two. Who, indeed, of these two shouldst be regarded the superior? If a gift be made to one who always accepts gifts, or to one that is possessed of pride, that gift becomes bootless like a clarified butter that is poured upon a forest conflagration. 59. As a fire, O king, never dies till it has consumed all that has been thrown into it, even so a beggar can never be silenced till he receives a donative. In this world, the food that is given by a charitable person is the sure support of the pious. If, therefore, the king does not give food, where will the pious that are desirous of salvation go? 60. They that have food in their houses are householders. Mendicants are supported by them. Life flows from food. Therefore, the giver of food is the giver of life. Coming out from among those that lead a domestic mode of life, mendicants depend upon those very persons from whom they come. Those self-restrained men, by doing this, acquire and enjoy fame and power. One is not to be called a mendicant for his having only renounced his possessions, or for his having only adopted a life of dependence on eleemosynary charity. He who renounces the possessions and pleasures of the world in a sincere frame of mind is to be regarded a true mendicant. 61. Unattached at heart, though attached in outward show, standing aloof from the world, having broken all his bonds, and regarding friend and foe equally, such a man, O king, is regarded to be emancipated. Having shaved their heads clean and adopted the brown robe, men may be seen to betake themselves to a life of wandering mendicancy, though bound by various ties and though ever on the lookout for bootless wealth. They who, casting off the 3 Vedas, their usual occupations, and children, adopt a life of mendicancy by taking up the triple-headed crutch and the brown robe, are really persons of little understanding. Without having cast off anger and other faults, the adoption of only the brown robe, no, O king, is due to the desire of earning the means of sustenance. Those persons of clean-shaven heads that have set up the banner of virtue, have this only, viz., the acquisition of sustenance, for their object in life. Therefore, O king, keeping thy passions under control, do thou win regions of bliss hereafter by supporting them that are truly pious amongst men of matted locks or clean-shaven heads, naked or clad in rags, or skins or brown robes. Who is the that is more virtuous than he who maintains his sacred fire, who performs sacrifices with presents of animals and dakshina, and who practices charity day and night? Arjuna continued, King Janaka is regarded to have been a truth-knowing person in this world. Even he, in this matter, viz., the ascertainment of duty, had become stupefied. Do not yield to stupefaction. Even thus the duties of domesticity are observed by persons practicing charity. By abstaining from injuries of all kinds, by casting off desire and wrath, by being engaged in protecting all creatures, by observing the excellent duty of charity, and lastly by cherishing superiors and persons of age, we shall succeed in attaining such regions of bliss as we like. By duly gratifying gods, guests, and all creatures, by worshipping Brahmanas, and by truthfulness of speech, we shall certainly attain to desirable regions of bliss. Section 19. Yudhishthira said, I am conversant with both the Vedas and the scriptures that lead to the attainment of Brahma. In the Vedas there are precepts of both kinds, viz., those that inculcate action and those that inculcate renouncement of action. The scriptures are confounding and their conclusions are based upon reasons. The truth, however, that is in the mantras, is duly known to me. Thou art conversant only with weapons and observant of the practices of heroes. Thou art unable to understand truly the sense of the scriptures. If thou wert really acquainted with duty, then thou couldst have understood that words such as these ought not to have been addressed to me by even one possessed of the clearest insight into the meaning of the scriptures and acquainted with the truths of religion. That, however, which thou hast said unto me, induced by fraternal affection, has been fit and proper, O son of Kunti. I am, for that, pleased with thee, O Arjuna. There is no one equal to thee in the three worlds in all duties connected with battle and in skill in respect of diverse kinds of acts. Thou mayst, therefore, speak of the subtleties connected with those subjects, subtleties, that is, that are impenetrable by others. It behoveth thee not, however, O Dhananjaya, to doubt my intelligence. Thou art conversant with the science of battle, but thou hast never waited upon the aged. Thou knowest not the conclusions arrived at by those that have studied the subject in brief and detail. Even this is the conclusion of intelligent men whose understanding are bent on achieving salvation, viz., that amongst ascetic penances, renunciation, and knowledge of Brahma, the second is superior to the first, and the third is superior to the second. This, however, that thou thinkest, viz., that there is nothing superior to wealth, is an error. I will convince thee of it, so that wealth may not again appear to thee in that light. All men that are righteous are seen to be devoted to ascetic penances and the study of the Vedas. The rishis also, that have many eternal regions for them, have the merit of penances. Others possessed of tranquility of soul, having no enemies, and dwelling in the woods, have, through penances and study of the Vedas, proceeded to heaven. Pious men, by restraining desire for worldly possessions, and casting off that darkness which is born of folly, proceed northward, that is, by luminous paths, to the regions reserved for practices of renunciation. The path that lies to the south and that leads to regions of light, that is, lunar regions, are reserved for men devoted to action. These are attained by persons subject to birth and death. That end, however, which persons desirous of salvation have before their eyes, is indescribable. Yoga is the best means for attaining to it. It is not easy to explain it to thee. Those that are learned live, reflecting on the scriptures from desire of finding what is unreal. They are, however, often led away to this and to that in the belief that the object of their search exists in this and that. Having mastered, however, the Vedas, the Aranyakas, and the other scriptures, they miss the real, like men failing to find solid timber in an uprooted banana plant. Some there are who, disbelieving in its unity, regard the soul that dwells in this physical frame consisting of the 5 elements, to be possessed of the attributes of desire and aversion, and others. 62. Incapable of being seen by the eye, exceedingly subtle, and inexpressible by words, it revolves in a round of rebirths among the creatures of the earth, keeping before it that which is the root of action. 63. Having made the soul advance towards itself, which is the spring of every kind of blessedness, having restrained all desires of the mind, and having cast off all kinds of action, one may become perfectly independent and happy. When there is such a path that is trod by the righteous and that is attainable by knowledge, why, O Arjuna, dost thou applaud wealth which is full of every kind of calamity? Men of olden times that were conversant with the scriptures, O Bharata, men that were always engaged in gifts and sacrifice and action, were of this opinion, O Bharata. There are some fools who, accomplished in the science of argumentation, deny the existence of the soul, in consequence of the strength of their convictions of a previous life. It is very difficult to make them accept this truth about final emancipation. 64. Those wicked men, though possessed of great learning, travel all over the earth, making speeches in assemblies, and deprecating the true doctrine about emancipation. O Partha, who else will succeed in understanding that which we do not understand? Indeed, as those men cannot understand the true meaning of the scriptures, similarly they cannot succeed in knowing those wise and pious persons that are truly great and that have deep acquaintance with the scriptures. O son of Kunti, men acquainted with truth obtain Brahma by asceticism and intelligence, and great happiness by renunciation. Section 20. Vaisampayana said, after Yudhishthira had stopped, the great ascetic Devasthana, possessed of eloquence, said these words, fraught with reason, unto the king. Devasthana said, Vulcan has told thee that there is nothing superior to wealth. I shall discourse to thee on that subject. Listen to me with undivided attention. O Ajatasattu, thou hast righteously won the earth. Having won her, it behoves thee not, O king, to abandon her without cause. 4 modes of life are indicated in the Vedas. Do thou, O king, duly pass through them, one after another. At present thou shouldst, therefore, perform great sacrifices with profuse presents. Amongst the very rishis, some are engaged in the sacrifice represented by Vedic study, and some in that presented by knowledge. Therefore, O Bharata, thou must know that the various ascetics also are addicted to action. The Vakanasas, however, are said to preach that he who does not seek for wealth is superior to him that seeks for it. 65. I think that he who would follow that precept would incur many faults. Men collect together diverse things for the performance of sacrifices, simply because of the Vedic ordinance. He who, tainted by his own understanding, giveth away wealth to an undeserving person without giving it to the deserving, doth not know that he incurs the sin of killing a fetus. 66. The exercise of the duty of charity after discriminating the deserving from the undeserving is not easy. The Supreme Ordainer created wealth for sacrifice, and he created man also for taking care of that wealth and for performing sacrifice. For this reason the whole of one's wealth should be applied to sacrifice. Pleasure would follow from it as a natural consequence. Possessed of abundant energy, Indra, by the performance of diverse sacrifices with profuse gifts of valuables, surpassed all the gods. Having got their chiefship by that means, he shineth in heaven. Therefore, everything should be applied to sacrifices. Clad in deer skins, the Hysud Mahadeva, having poured his own self as a libation in the sacrifice called Sava, became the first of gods, and surpassing all creatures in the universe and prevailing over them by means of that achievement, shines in resplendence. King Mahabharata, the son of Avikshit, by the profusion of his wealth, vanquished Sakra himself, the chief of the gods. In the great sacrifice he performed, all the vessels were of gold, and Sri herself came in person. Thou hast heard that the great King Harishchandra, having performed sacrifices, earned great merit and great happiness. Though a man, he nevertheless vanquished Sakra by his wealth. For this reason everything should be applied to sacrifice. Section 21. Devasthana said, in this connection is cited an old history, viz., the discourse that Vrihaspati, asked by Indra, delivered unto him. Vrihaspati said, contentment is the highest heaven, contentment is the highest bliss. There is nothing higher than contentment. Contentment stands as the highest. When one draws away all his desires like a tortoise drawing in all its limbs, then the natural resplendence of his soul soon manifests itself. When one does not fear any creature, nor any creature is frightened at one, when one conquers one's desire and aversion, then is one said to behold one's soul. When one, indeed, in word and thought, seeks to injure nobody and cherishes no desire, one is said to attain to Brahma. Thus, O son of Kunti, whatever religion is followed by creatures, they obtain corresponding fruits. Awaken thyself by this consideration, O Bharata. 67. Some praise peacefulness, some praise exertion, some there are that praise contemplation, and some praise both peacefulness and exertion. 68. Some praise sacrifice, others renunciation. Some praise gifts, others acceptance. Some, abandoning everything, live in silent meditation. Some praise sovereignty and the cherishing of subjects, after slaying, cutting and piercing foes. Some are for passing their days in retirement. Observing all this, the conclusion of the learned is that that religion which consists in not injuring any creature is worthy of the approbation of the righteous. Abstention from injury, truthfulness of speech, justice, compassion, self-restraint, procreation of offspring, upon one's own wives, amiability, modesty, patience, the practice of these is the best of a religions as said by the self-create Manu himself. Therefore, O son of Kunti, do thou observe this religion with care. That Kshatriya, who, conversant with the truths or royal duties, takes sovereignty upon himself, restraining his soul at all times, equally regarding that which is dear and that which is not, and subsisting upon the remains of sacrificial feasts, who is engaged in restraining the wicked and cherishing the righteous, who obliges his subjects to tread in the path of virtue and who himself treads in that path, who at last transmits his crown to his son and betakes himself to the woods, there to live on the products of the wilderness and act according to the ordinances or the Vedas after having cast off all idleness, that Kshatriya who conducts himself thus, conforming in everything to the well-known duties of kings, is sure to obtain excellent fruits in both this world and the next. That final emancipation, of which thou speakest, is exceedingly difficult to obtain, and its pursuit is attended with many impediments. They that adopt such duties and practice charity and ascetic penances, that are possessed of the quality of compassion and are freed from desire and wrath, that are engaged in ruling their subjects with righteousness and fighting for the sake of kine and brahmanas, attain hereafter to a high end. For the Rudras with the Vasas and the Adityas, O scorcher of foes, and the Sadhyas and hosts of kings adopt this religion, practicing without heedlessness the duties inculcated by that religion, they attain to heaven through those acts of theirs. Section 22. Vaisampayana said, after this, Arjuna once more addressed his eldest brother of unfading glory, viz., King Yudhishthira of cheerless heart, and said these words, O thou that art conversant with every kind of duty, having by the practice of Kshatriya duties obtained sovereignty that is so very difficult of acquisition, and having conquered all thy foes, why dost thou burn in grief? O king, as regards Kshatriyas, death in battle is regarded more meritorious for them than the performance of diverse sacrifices. It is so declared in the ordinance that lays down the duties of Kshatriyas. Penances and renunciation are the duties of Brahmanas. Even this is the ordinance, affecting the two orders, about the next world. Indeed, O puissant one, death in battle is laid down for Kshatriyas. The duties of Kshatriyas are exceedingly fierce and are always connected with the use of weapons, and it has been laid down, O chief of the Bharatas, that they should, when the time comes, perish by weapons on the field of battle. The life of even a Brahmana, O king, that lives in the observance of Kshatriya duties, is not censurable, for Kshatriyas also have sprung from Brahmana. Neither renunciation, nor sacrifice, nor penances, nor dependence on the wealth of others, O ruler of men, has been ordained for Kshatriyas. Thou art acquainted with all duties, and thou art of righteous soul, O bull of Bharata's race. Thou art a wise king, skilled in all acts. Thou canst distinguish what is right in this world from what is wrong. Casting off this cheerlessness by repentance, address thyself with a strong will to action. The heart of a Kshatriya especially is hard as thunder. Having by the exercise of Kshatriya duties vanquished thy foes and acquired empire without a thorn in its side, conquer thy soul, O ruler of men, and be engaged in the performance of sacrifices and the practice of charity. Indra himself, though a Brahmana, became a Kshatriya in his acts, and battled with his sinful kinsfolk for 810 times. Those acts of his, O monarch, are adorable and worthy of praise. Through them he obtained, as we have heard, the chiefship of the gods. Do thou, therefore, O monarch, perform sacrifices with profuse presents even as Indra did, O ruler of men, and thereby free thyself from thy fever. Do not, O bull among Kshatriyas, grieve thus for what is past. They that have been slain have attained to the highest end, sanctified by weapons and agreeably to the ordinances of the Kshatriya religion. That which has happened was ordained to happen. Destiny, O tiger among kings, is incapable of being resisted. Section 23. Vaisampayana said, thus addressed by Arjuna of curly hair, the Kuru king born of Kunti remained speechless. Then the island-born Vyasa said these words. Vyasa said, the words of Arjuna, O amiable Yudhishthira, are true. The highest religion, as declared by the scriptures, depends on the duties of domesticity. Thou art acquainted with all duties. Do thou then duly practice the duties prescribed for thee, viz., the duties of domesticity. A life of retirement in the woods, casting off the duties of domesticity, has not been laid down for thee. The gods, Pitris, guests, and servants, all depend, for their sustenance, upon the person leading a life of domesticity. Do thou then support all these, O Lord of the earth, birds and animals and various other creatures, O ruler of men, are supported by men leading domestic lives. He, therefore, that belongs to that mode of life is superior to all others. A life of domesticity is the most difficult of all the 4 modes of life. Do thou practice that mode of life then, O Partha, which is difficult of being practiced by persons of unrestrained sense. Thou hast a good knowledge of all the Vedas. Thou hast turned great ascetic merit. It behoveth thee, therefore, to bear like an ox the burthen of thy ancestral kingdom. Penances, sacrifices, forgiveness, learning, mendicancy, keeping the senses under control, contemplation, living in solitude, contentment, and knowledge of Brahma should, O king, be striven after by Brahmanas to the best of their ability for the attainment of success. I shall now tell thee the duties of Kshatriyas. They are not unknown to thee. Sacrifice, learning, exertion, ambition. 69. Wielding the rod of punishment, fierceness, protection of subjects, knowledge of the Vedas, practice of all kinds of penances, goodness of conduct, acquisition of wealth, and gifts to deserving persons. These, O king, well performed and acquired by persons of the royal order, secure for them both this world and the next, as heard by us. Amongst these, O son of Kunti, wielding the rod of chastisement has been said to be the foremost. Strength must always reside in a Kshatriya, and upon strength depends chastisement. Those duties that I have mentioned are, O king, the principal ones for Kshatriyas and contribute greatly to their success. Vrihaspati, in this connection, sang this verse, like a snake devouring a mouse, the earth devours a king that is inclined to peace and a Brahmana that is exceedingly attached to a life of domesticity. It is heard again that the royal sage Sudama, only by wielding the rod of chastisement, obtained the highest success, like Daksha himself, the son of Prishitas. Yudhishthira said, O Holy One, by what acts did Sudama, that lord of the earth, obtain the highest success? I desire to hear the history of that king. Vyasa said, in this connection is cited this old history. There were two brothers, viz., Sankha and Lakita, of rigid vows. The two brothers had two separate dwellings, both of which were beautiful. Situate by the bank of the stream called Vayhuda, both of those residences were adorned with trees that were always burthened with flowers and fruits. Once on a time Lakita came to the residence of his brother Sankha. At that time, however, Sankha had gone out of his asylum on no fixed purpose. Arrived at the asylum of his brother, Lakita plucked many ripe fruits. Obtaining them, the regenerate Lakita began to eat them without any qualms of conscience. While still employed in the act of eating, Sankha came back to his retreat. Beholding him eating, Sankha addressed his brother, saying, Whence have these fruits been obtained, and for what reason art thou eating them? Approaching his elder brother and saluting him, Lakita smilingly replied, saying, I have taken them even from this retreat. Filled with great rage, Sankha said unto him, Thou hast committed theft by thyself taking these fruits. Go and approaching the king confess to him what thou hast done. Tell him, O best of kings, I have committed the offence of approaching what was not given to me. Knowing me for a thief and observing the duty of thy order, do thou soon inflict upon me, O ruler of men, the punishment of a thief. Thus addressed, the highly blessed Lakita of rigid vows, at the command of his brother, proceeded to King Sudama. Hearing from his gatekeepers that Lakita had come, King Sudama, with his counsellors, advanced, for receiving the sage. Meeting him, the king addressed that foremost of all persons conversant with duties, saying, Tell me, O revered one, the reason of thy coming. Regard it as already accomplished. Thus questioned, that regenerate sage said unto Sudama, Do thou promise first that thou wilt achieve it? It will then behove thee, after hearing me, to accomplish that promise. O bull among men, I ate some fruits that had not been given me by my elder brother. Do thou, O monarch, punish me for it without delay. Sudama answered, If the king be regarded as competent to wield the rod of chastisement, he should be regarded, O bull among Brahmanas, as equally competent to pardon. Purified in respect of thy act, O thou of high vows, consider thyself as pardoned. Tell me now what other wishes thou hast. I shall certainly accomplish those commands of thine. Vyasa continued, thus honoured by the high-souled king, the regenerate sage Lakita, however, did not solicit him for any other favour. Then that ruler of the earth caused the two hands of the high-souled Lakita to be cut off, whereupon the latter, bearing the punishment, went away. returning to his brother Sanka, Lakita, in great affection, said, "It behoveth thee now to pardon this wretch that hath been duly punished for what he did." Sanka said, "I am not angry with thee, nor hast thou injured me, O foremost of all persons conversant with duties. Thy virtue, however, had suffered a shock. I have rescued thee from that plight. Proceed without delay to the river Vahuda and gratify duly, with oblations of water, the gods, Rishis and the Bitrus, and never again set thy heart on sin." Hearing these words of Sanka, Lakita performed his ablutions in the sacred stream and set about for commencing the water rite. Upon this, 2 hands, resembling 2 lotuses, appeared at the extremities of his stumps. Filled with wonder, he came back to his brother and showed him the 2 hands. Sanka said unto him, "All this has been accomplished by me through my penances. Do not be surprised at it. Providence hath been the instrument here." Lakita answered, "O thou of great splendor, why didst thou not purify me at first, when, O best of regenerate ones, such was the energy of thy penances?" Sanka said, "I should not have acted otherwise. I am not thy chastiser. The ruler, who has punished thee, has been himself purified, as also thyself, along with the Pitrus." Vyasa continued, "That king, O eldest son of Pandu, became eminent by this act and obtained the highest success like the Lord Daksha himself. Even this is the duty of Kshatriyas, viz., the ruling of subjects. Any other, O monarch, would be regarded as a wrong path for them. Do not give way to grief. O best of all persons conversant with duty, listen to the beneficial words of this thy brother. Wielding the rod of chastisement, O king, is the duty of kings and not the shaving of the head." Section 24. Vaisampayana said, "Once more the great sage Krishnadvapayana said these words unto Ajatasattu, the son of Kunti, 'Let these great warriors of abundant energy of mind, O monarch, let these brothers of thine, O Yudhishthira, the chief of the Bharatas, obtain those wishes of theirs that they cherished while dwelling in the woods. Rule thou the earth, O son of Pritha, like another, Yayati, the son of Nuashur. Before now misery was yours while ye dwelt in the woods in the observance of ascetic penances. That misery is ended, O tiger among men. Enjoy happiness, therefore, for some time. Having, O Bharata, earned and enjoyed religious merit and wealth and pleasure for some time with thy brothers, thou mayst then, O king, retire into the woods. Be freed first, O Bharata, from the debt thou owest to persons that may beg of thee, to the Pitrus, and to the gods. Thou mayst then, O son of Kunti, practice all the other modes of life that come afterwards. Do thou, O son of Kuru's race, perform the sacrifices of Savamda and Aswamda. Thou shalt then attain, O monarch, to the highest end hereafter. Installing thy brothers also in great sacrifices with plentiful presents to the Brahmanas, thou shalt, O son of Pandu, acquire great fame. There is a saying, O tiger among men and best of the Kurus. Listen to it, for by acting according to it, O king, thou shalt not swerve from virtue. Those men only, O Yudhishthira, whose practices resemble those of robbers, cause a king by their counsels to take to a career of war and victory. 70. That king who, guided by considerations of place and time and moved by an understanding dependent on the scriptures, pardons even a number of robbers, incurs no sin. That king who, realizing his tribute of a sixth, doth not protect his kingdom, taketh the fourth part of the sins of his kingdom. 71. Listen also to that by which a king may not swerve from virtue. By transgressing the scriptures, one incurs sin, while by obeying them one may live fearlessly. That king who, guided by an understanding based upon the scriptures and disregarding lust and wrath, behaves impartially, like a father, towards all his subjects, never incurs sin. O thou of great splendor, if a king, afflicted by destiny, fails to accomplish an act which he should, such failure would not be called a trespass. By force and policy should the king put down his foes. He must not suffer sin to be perpetrated in his kingdom, but should cause virtue to be practiced. Brave men, those that are respectable in their practices, they that are virtuous in their acts, they that are possessed of learning, O Yudhishthira, Brahmanas conversant with Vedic texts and rites, and men of wealth, should especially be protected. In determining suits and accomplishing religious acts, they that are possessed of great learning should alone be employed. A prudent king will never repose his confidence upon one individual, however accomplished. That king who does not protect his subjects, whose passions are ungovernable, who is full of vanity, who is stained with haughtiness and malice, incurs sin and earns the reproach of tyranny. If the subjects of a king, O monarch, waste away from want of protection and are afflicted by the gods and ground down by robbers, the sin of all this stains the king himself. There is no sin, O Yudhishthira, in doing an act with heartiness, after full deliberation and consultation with men capable of offering good advice. Our tasks fail or succeed through destiny. If exertion, however, be applied, sin would not touch the king. I shall recite to thee, O tiger among kings, the story of what happened to an ancient king of the name of Hayagriva, O son of Pandu, the story, viz., of the heroic Hayagriva of unstained deeds, who, after having slain a large number of his foes in battle, was himself defeated and slain while without a follower by his side. Having achieved all that should be done for keeping foes under check and adopted all those foremost of means by which men may be protected, Hayagriva acquired great fame from the battles he fought and is now enjoying great bliss in heaven. Mangled by robbers with weapons, boldly fighting with them, and casting off his life in battle, the high Hayagriva, ever attentive to his kingly duties, achieved the object of his life and is now enjoying great bliss in heaven. The bow was his sacrificial stake, and the bowstring was the cord for tying the victims. Shafts constituted the smaller ladle and the sword the large one, and blood was the clarified butter that he poured. The car was the altar, and the wrath he felt in battle was the fire, and the four foremost of steeds yoked into his vehicle were the four horses. Having poured upon that sacrificial fire his foes as libations and then his own life breaths at the completion of the sacrifice, that vigorous lion among kings, viz., Hayagriva, became freed from sin and is now sporting in the regions of the gods. Having protected his kingdom with policy and intelligence, the high Hayagriva, of resigned self and great strength of mind and accustomed to the performance of sacrifices, filled all the worlds with his fame and is now sporting in the region of the gods. 72. Having obtained the merit dependent on the performance of sacrifices, as also every kind of merit that is connected with human affairs, he wielded the rod of chastisement and ruled the earth with vigor and without pride. For this the virtuous and high Hayagriva is sporting in the region of the gods. 73. Possessed of learning, practicing renunciation, actuated by faith, and full of gratitude, that king, having performed diverse acts, left this world of men and won the regions that are reserved for the intelligent and the wise and those that are of approved usages and behavior, and prepared to cast off their lives in battle. Having studied the Vedas well and the other scriptures also, having ruled his kingdom properly and caused all the four orders to adhere to their respective duties, the high Hayagriva is sporting in joy in the regions of the gods. Having won many battles and cherished his subjects, having drunk the soma juice in sacrifices and gratified the foremost of Brahmanas with presents and judiciously wielded the rod of chastisement over those placed under his sway and at last cast off his life in battle, that king is living happily in heaven. His life was worthy of every praise. Learned and honest men applaud it, deserving as it is of every applause. Having won heaven and acquired the regions reserved for heroes, that high-souled monarch of virtuous deeds became crowned with success. Section 25. Vaisampayana said, hearing the words of the island-born rishi and seeing Dhananjaya angry, Yudhishthira, the son of Kunti, saluted Vyasa and made the following answer. Yudhishthira said, this earthly sovereignty and the diverse enjoyments appertaining thereto fail to give any joy to my heart. On the other hand, this poignant grief, consequent upon the loss of my kinsman, is eating away its core. Hearing the lamentations of these women who have lost their heroic husbands and children, I fail to attain peace, O sage. Vaisampayana continued, thus addressed the virtuous Vyasa, that foremost of all persons conversant with yoga, possessed of great wisdom and intimately acquainted with the Vedas, said unto Yudhishthira the following words. Vyasa said, no man can acquire anything by his own acts or by sacrifices and worship. No man can give anything to a fellow man. Man acquires everything through time. The Supreme Ordainer has made the course of time the means of acquisition. By mere intelligence or study of the scriptures, men, if time be unfavorable, cannot acquire any earthly possession. Sometimes an ignorant fool may succeed in winning wealth. Time is the efficacious means for the accomplishment of all acts. During times of adversity, neither science, nor incantations, nor drugs, yield any fruits. In times, however, of prosperity, those very things, properly applied, become efficacious and bear success. By time the winds blow violently, by time the clouds become rain-charged, by time tanks become adorned with lotuses of different kinds, by time trees in the forest become decked with flowers, by time nights become dark or lighted, by time the moon becomes full. If the time for it does not come, trees do not bear flowers and fruits. If the time for it does not come, the currents of rivers do not become fierce. Birds and snakes and deer and elephants and other animals never become excited when the time for it does not come. If the time for it does not come, women do not conceive. It is with time that winter and summer and the rainy season come. If the time for it does not come, no one is born and no one dies. If the time does not come, the infant does not acquire power of speech. If the time does not come, one does not acquire youth. It is with time that the seed sown puts forth its sprouts. If the time does not come, the sun does not appear above the horizon, nor, when the time for it does not come, does he repair to the Easter hills. If the time for it does not come, the moon does not wax nor wane, nor the ocean, with its high billows, rise and ebb. In this connection is instanced the old story recited, O Yudhishthira, by King Snigit in grief. The irresistible course of time affects all mortals. All earthly things, ripened by time, suffer destruction. Some, O king, slay some men. The slayers, again, are slain by others. This is the language of the world. Really, however, no one slays and no one is slain. Some one thinks men slay their fellow men. Another thinks men do not slay. The truth is that the birth and destruction of all creatures have been ordained to happen in consequence of their very nature. Upon the loss of one's wealth or the death of one's wife or son or sire, one cries out, saying, alas, what grief! And dwelling upon that sorrow always enhances it. Why do you, like a foolish person, indulge in grief? Why do you grieve for them that are subject to grief? 74. Behold, grief is increased by indulgence, as fear is by yielding to. This body even is not mine. Nothing in this earth is mine. Or, the things of this earth belong as much to others as to me. The wise, seeing this, do not suffer themselves to be deluded. There are thousands of causes for sorrow, and hundreds of causes for joy. These every day affect the ignorant only, but not him that is wise. These, in course of time, become objects of affection or aversion, and appearing as bliss or woe revolve, as if in a wheel, for affecting living creatures. There is only sorrow in this world, but no happiness. It is for this that sorrow only is felt. Indeed, sorrow springs from that affliction called desire, and happiness springs from the affliction called sorrow. Sorrow comes after happiness, and happiness after sorrow. One does not always suffer sorrow or always enjoy happiness. Happiness always ends in sorrow, and sometimes proceeds from sorrow itself. He, therefore, that desires eternal happiness must abandon both. When sorrow must arise upon the expiration of happiness, and happiness upon the expiration of sorrow, one should, for that, cast off, like a snake-bit, limb of one's body, that from which one experiences sorrow, or that heart-burning which is nurtured by sorrow, or that which is the root of his anxiety. 75. Be it happiness or sorrow, be it agreeable or disagreeable, whatever comes should be borne with an unaffected heart. O amiable one, if thou abstainest, in even a slight measure, from doing what is agreeable to your wives and children, thou shalt then know who is whose and why so and for what. They that are highly stupid and they that are masters of their souls enjoy happiness here. They, however, that occupy an intermediate place suffer misery. This, O Yudhishthira, is what Snigit of great wisdom said. That person who was conversant with what is good or bad in this world, with duties, and with happiness and misery. He who is grieved at other people's griefs can never be happy. There is no end of grief, and grief arises from happiness itself. Happiness and misery, prosperity and adversity, gain and loss, death and life, in their turn, wait upon all creatures. For this reason the wise man of tranquil soul should neither be elated with joy nor be depressed with sorrow. To be engaged in battle has been said to be the sacrifice for a king. A due observance of the science of chastisement is his yoga, and the gift of wealth in sacrifices in the form of dakshina is his renunciation. All these should be regarded as acts that sanctify him. By governing the kingdom with intelligence and policy, casting off pride, performing sacrifices, and looking at everything and all persons with kindness and impartiality, a high-souled king, after death, sports in the region of the gods. By winning battles, protecting his kingdom, drinking the soma juice, advancing his subjects, wielding judiciously the rod of chastisement, and casting off his body at last in fight, a king enjoys happiness in heaven. Having studied all the Vedas and the other scriptures duly, having protected the kingdom properly, and having caused all the four orders to adhere to their respective duties, a king becomes sanctified and finally sports in heaven. He is the best of kings whose conduct, even after his death, is applauded by the inhabitants of city and country and by his counselors and friends. Section 26. Vaisampayana said, in this connection, the high-souled Yudhishthira said unto Arjuna these words fraught with reason. Thou thinkest, O Partha, that there is nothing superior to wealth, and that the poor man can neither have heaven, nor happiness, nor the acquisition of his wishes. This, however, is not true. Many persons are seen that have been crowned with success through sacrifice in the shape of Vedic study. Many sages are seen by devotion to penances to have acquired eternal regions of bliss. They, O Dhananjaya, who always observe the practices of the rishis by betaking themselves to Brahmacharya and who become acquainted with all duties, are regarded by the gods as Brahmanas. O Dhananjaya, thou shouldst always regard those rishis that are devoted to the study of the Vedas and those that are devoted to the pursuit of true knowledge as persons that are truly virtuous. O son of Pandu, all our acts depend upon those that are devoted to the acquisition of true knowledge. 76. We know this to be the opinion of the Kanasas, O puissant one. The Agas, the Prishnis, the Sikatas, O Bharata, the Aranas, and the Kitavas, have all gone to heaven through the merit of Vedic study. By performing those acts, O Dhananjaya, that are indicated in the Vedas, viz., battle, study of the Vedas, sacrifices, the restraint of passion that is so difficult, one goes to heaven by the southern path of the sun, Dakshinayana. I have, before this, told thee that those very regions belong to persons that are observant of Vedic acts. Thou shalt see, however, that the northern path, Uttarana, is travelled by those that are devoted to yoga penances. Those eternal and bright regions to which that path leads belong to men of yoga. Of these two, the northern path is much applauded by those conversant with the Puranas. Thou shouldst know that one acquires heaven through contentment. From contentment springs great happiness. There is nothing higher than contentment. And to the yogin who has controlled wrath and joy, contentment is his high praise and success. In this connection is cited the discourse by Yayati of old. Listening to that discourse, one may succeed in withdrawing all his desires like a tortoise drawing in all his limbs. When one cherishes no fear of anything, when one is not feared by anything, when one cherishes no desire, when one bears no hate, then is one said to have attained to the state of Brahma. When one does not bear sinfully towards any creature, in act, thought, or word, one is then said to have attained to Brahma. When one has controlled his pride and folly, and withdrawn himself from all attachments, it is then that that pious man of irradiated soul becomes fit for attaining to that salvation which consists in the annihilation of separate existence. Listen now to me with concentrated attention, O son of Pritha, as I say it unto thee. Some desire virtue, some good conduct, and some wealth. One may desire wealth as a means for the acquisition of virtue. The abandonment, however, of such desire would be better for him. 77. There are many faults attached to wealth and consequently to those religious acts that are performed with wealth. We have seen it with our own eyes. It behoveth thee also to see this. He that desires wealth finds it very difficult to abandon that which should by every means be abandoned. Good deeds are very rare in those that amass riches. It is said that wealth can never be acquired without injuring others, and that, when earned, it brings numerous troubles. A person of narrow heart, setting up not the fear of repentance, commits acts of aggression towards others, tempted by even a little wealth, unconscious all the while of the sin of Brahmanicide that he incurs by his acts. Obtaining wealth which is so difficult of acquisition, one burns with grief if one has to give a portion of it to one's servants, with grief, that is, which is equal to what one would feel if one is actually robbed by depredators. If, on the other hand, one does not part with one's wealth, obloquy becomes one's share. One, however, that has no wealth, never becomes the subject of censure. Withdrawn from all attachments, such a person can become happy in all respects by supporting life upon what little he may obtain as alms. No one, however, can be happy by the acquisition of wealth. In this connection, certain verses relating to sacrifices are recited by persons conversant with ancient scriptures. Wealth was created by the Creator for the sake of sacrifices, and man was created by him for protecting that wealth and performing sacrifices. For this, all wealth should be applied to sacrifices. It is not proper that it should be spent for the gratification of desire of enjoyment. The Creator then confers wealth upon mortals for the sake of sacrifices. Know this, O son of Kunti, thou that art the foremost of all wealthy persons. It is for this that the wise think that wealth, without doubt, is nobody's on earth. One should perform sacrifices with it and give it away with a trustful heart. One should spend, in gift, what one has acquired, and not waste or spend it in gratifying one's desire of enjoyment. What use is there in amassing wealth when such proper objects exist in which to spend it? Those persons of little understanding that give away wealth, and to men that have swerved from the duties of their order, have to subsist hereafter for 100 years on ordure and dirt. That men give unto the undeserving and refrain from giving unto the deserving is due to inability to discriminate between the deserving and the undeserving. For this reason, the practice of even the virtue of charity is difficult. These are the two faults connected with wealth even when acquired, viz., gift to an undeserving person and abstaining from giving unto him that is deserving. Section 27. Yudhishthira said, in consequence of the fall of Abhimanyu of tender years, of the sons of Draupadi, of Drishthadhyumna, of Virata, of King Drupada, of Vasusna conversant with every duty, of the royal Drishtaketu, and of diverse other kings hailing from diverse regions, in battle, grief does not forsake my wretched self that am a slayer of kinsmen. Indeed, I am inordinately covetous of kingdom and am an exterminator of my own race. He upon whose breast and limbs I used to roll in sport, alas, that Ganga's son has been slain by me in battle through lust of sovereignty. When I beheld that lion among men, viz., our grandsire, assailed by Sikandin and trembling and reeling in consequence of Patha's shafts that resembled thunderbolts in energy, when I beheld his tall form pierced all over with blazing arrows and himself become weak like an aged lion, my heart was deeply pained. When I beheld that afflicter of hostile cars reel like a mountain summit and fall down strengthless on the terrace of his own vehicle with his face turned towards the east, my senses were stupefied. That scion of Kuru's race who with bow and shaft in hand had contended in fierce battle for many days with Rama himself of Bhrigu's line on the field sanctified by Kuru, that son of Ganga, that hero, who, at Varanasi, for the sake of brides, had, on the single car, challenged to battle the assembled Kshatriyas of the world, he who had burnt by the energy of his weapons that irresistible and foremost of kings, viz., Ugrayuda, alas, that hero has been caused by me to be slain in battle. Knowing full well that Sikandin the prince of Panchala was his destroyer, that hero still refrained from slaying the prince with his shafts. Alas, such a magnanimous warrior was slain by Arjuna. O best of sages, at that moment when I beheld the grandsire stretched on the earth and covered with blood, a violent fever afflicted my heart. He who had protected and reared us when we were children, alas, he was caused to be slain by my sinful self that am covetous of kingdom, that am a slayer of reverend sinners, and a perfect fool, for the sake of sovereignty that would last but a few days. Our preceptor, the great archer Drona, adored by all the kings, was approached by me and addressed falsely in respect of his son. The memory of that act of mine is burning all my limbs. The preceptor said unto me, Tell me truly, O king, whether my son liveth still. Expecting truth from me, the Brahmana asked me of all others. By silently uttering the word elephant, I behaved falsely towards him. Sinful that I am, exceedingly covetous of kingdom, and a slayer of my reverend sinners, I behaved even thus towards my preceptor in battle, throwing off the garb of truth, which I was believed to wear, for I said unto him that is what Haman had been killed when, in fact, an elephant of that name had been slain. To what regions shall I go, thereafter, having perpetrated such infamous deeds? I caused also my eldest brother Karna to be slain, that terrible warrior who never retreated from battle. Who is the more sinful than I? Through covetousness I caused Abhimanyu of tender years, that hero who resembled a lion born in the hills, to penetrate into the array that was protected by Drona himself. I am like one guilty of infanticide. Sinful as I am, I have not since then been able to look Arjuna or the lotus-eyed Krishna in the face. I grieve also for Draupadi, who is bereft of her 5 sons like the earth bereft of her 5 mountains. I am a great offender, a great sinner, and a destroyer of the earth. Without rising from this seat that I now occupy, I will weaken my body by starvation, and meet with death. Know me, who am the slayer of my preceptor, as one that has sat down here in the observance of the Prabhu, an exterminator of my race. I must do so in order that I may not be reborn in any of other borders of beings. 78. I shall forego all food and drink, and without moving from this place, O great ascetic, shall dry up my life breaths that are so dear. I pray you with humility, grant me permission in this and go whithersoever you please. Let everyone grant me permission. I shall cast off this body of mine. Vaisampayana continued, restraining Pritha's son who, stupefied by sorrow on account of his kinsman, uttered such words. Vyasa, that best of ascetics, spoke as follows, first telling him, this cannot be. Vyasa said, it behoveth thee not, O monarch, to indulge in such poignant grief. I shall repeat what I have once said. All this is destiny, O puissant one. Without doubt, all creatures that are born display at first a union of diverse materials and forces. Dissolution, however, overtakes them at the end. Like bubbles in the water, they rise and disappear. All things massed together are sure to crumble away, and all things that rise must fall down. Union ends in dissolution, and life ends in death. Idleness, though temporarily agreeable, ends in misery, and labor with skill, though temporarily painful, ends in happiness. Affluence, prosperity, modesty, contentment, and fame dwell in labor and skill, but not in idleness. Friends are not competent to bestow happiness, nor foes competent to inflict misery. Similarly, wisdom does not bring wealth, nor does wealth bring happiness. Since, O son of Kunti, thou hast been created by the Maker to engage thyself in work. Success springs from work. Thou art not fit, O king, to avoid work. Section 28. Vaisampayana said, Vyasa then dispelled the grief of the eldest son of Pandu, who, burning with sorrow on account of the slaughter of his kinsman, had resolved to make an end of himself. Vyasa said, in this connection is cited the old story, O tiger among men, that is known by the name of Asma's discourse. Listen to it, O Yudhishthira. Janaka, the ruler of the Vedas, O king, filled with sorrow and grief, questioned a wise Brahmana of the name of Asma for the resolution of his doubts. Janaka said, how should a man desirous of his own good behave upon occasions of the accession and the destruction of both kinsmen and wealth? Asma said, immediately after the formation of a man's body, joys and griefs attach themselves to it. Although there is a possibility of either of the two overtaking the person, yet whichever actually overtakes him quickly robs him of his reason, like the wind driving away gathering clouds. In times of prosperity, one thinks in this strain, viz., I am of high birth. I can do whatever I like! I am not an ordinary man. His mind becomes soaked with such triple vanity. Addicted to all earthly enjoyments, he begins to waste the wealth hoarded by his ancestors. Impoverished in course of time, he regards the appropriation of what belongs to others as even laudable. Like a hunter piercing a deer with his shafts, the king then punishes that wicked wight, that robber of other people's possessions, that transgressor of law and rule. Without attaining to 100 years, the usual period of human life, such men scarcely live beyond 20 or 30 years. Carefully observing the behavior of all creatures, a king should, by the exercise of his intelligence, apply remedies for alleviating the great sorrows of his subjects. The causes of all mental sorrow are two, viz., delusion of the mind and the accession of distress. No third cause exists. All these diverse kinds of woe, as also those arising from attachment to earthly enjoyments that overtake man, are even such. 79. Decrepitude and death, like a pair of wolves, devour all creatures, strong or weak, short or tall. No man can escape decrepitude and death, not even the subjugator of the whole earth girt by the sea. Be it happiness or be it sorrow that comes upon creatures, it should be enjoyed or borne without elation or depression. There is no method of escape from them. The evils of life, O king, overtake one in early or middle or old age. They can never be avoided, while those sources of bliss that are coveted never come. 80. The absence of what is agreeable, the presence of what is disagreeable, good and evil, bliss and woe, follow destiny. Similarly, the birth of creatures and their death, and the accessions of gain and loss, are all preordained. Even a scent, colour, taste, and the touch spring naturally. Happiness and misery arise from what has been preordained. Seats and beds and vehicles, prosperity and drink and food, ever approach, leaving creatures according to time's course. 81. Physicians even get ill. The strong become weak. They that are in the enjoyment of prosperity lose all and become indigent. The course of time is very wonderful. High birth, health, beauty, prosperity, and objects of enjoyment are all won through destiny. The indigent, although they may not desire it, have many children. The affluent again are seen to be childless. Wonderful is the course of destiny. The evils caused by disease, fire, water, weapons, hunger, poison, fever, and death, and falls from high places, overtake a man according to the destiny under which he is born. It is seen in this world that somebody without sinning suffers diverse ills, while another, having sinned, is not borne down by the weight of calamity. It is seen that somebody in the enjoyment of wealth perishes in youth, while one that is poor drags on his existence, borne down by decrepitude, for 100 years. One born in an ignoble race may have a very long life, while one sprung from a noble line perishes soon like an insect. In this world, it is very common that persons in affluent circumstances have no appetite, while they that are indigent can digest chips of wood. Impelled by destiny, whatever sins the man of wicked soul, discontented with his condition, commits, saying, I am the he regards to be all for his good. Hunting, dice, women, wine, brawls, these are censured by the wise. Many persons, however, possessed of even extensive knowledge of the scriptures are seen to be addicted to them. Objects, whether coveted or otherwise, come upon creatures in consequence of time's course. No other cause can be traced. Air, space, fire, moon, sun, day, night, the luminous bodies in the firmament, rivers, and mountains, who makes them and who supports them? Cold and heat and rain come one after another in consequence of time's course. It is even so, O bull among men, with the happiness and the misery of mankind. Neither medicines, nor incantations, can rescue the man assailed by decrepitude or overtaken by death. As two logs of wood floating on the great ocean, come together and are again, when the time comes, separated, even so creatures come together and are again, when the time comes, separated. Time acts equally towards those men that are in affluent circumstances and that enjoy the pleasures of song and dance in the company of women, and those helpless men that live upon the food that others supply. In this world 1,000 kinds of relationship are contracted, such as mother and father and son and wife. In reality, however, whose are they and whose are we? No one can become anyone's own, nor can anyone become anybody else's own. Our union here with wives and kinsfolk and well-wishers is like that of travellers at a roadside inn. Where am I? Where shall go? Who am I? How come I here? What for and whom I grieve? Reflecting on these questions one obtains tranquility. Life and its environment are constantly revolving like a wheel, and the companionship of those that are dear is transitory. The union with brother, mother, father, and friend is like that of travellers in an inn. Men of knowledge behold, as if with corporeal eyes, the next world that is unseen. Without disregarding the scriptures, one desirous of knowledge should have faith. One possessed of knowledge should perform the rites laid down in respect of the Pythrus and the gods, practice all religious duties, perform sacrifices, judiciously pursue virtue, profit, and pleasure. Alas, no one understands that the world is sinking on the ocean of time that is so very deep and that is infested with those huge crocodiles called decrepitude and death. Many physicians may be seen afflicted with all the members of their families, although they have carefully studied the science of medicine. 82. Taking bitters and diverse kinds of oily drugs, these succeed not in escaping death, like ocean in transcending its continents. Men well versed in chemistry, notwithstanding chemical compounds applied judiciously, are seen to be broken down by decrepitude like trees broken down by elephants. Similarly, persons possessed of ascetic merit, devoted to study of the Vedas, practicing charity, and frequently performing sacrifices, succeed not in escaping decrepitude and death. As regards all creatures that have taken birth, neither years, nor months, nor fortnights, nor days, nor nights, that have once passed, do ever return. Man, whose existence is so transitory, is forced, in course of time, whether he will or not, to come upon this inevitable and broad path that has to be trodden by every creature. 83. Whether the body springs from the creature or the creature springs from the body, one's union, however, with wives and other friends is like that of travellers in an inn. 84. One cannot obtain a lasting companionship with anyone. One cannot obtain such companionship with one's own body. How then it can be had with anyone else? Where, O King, is thy sight today and with thy grand desire? Thou beholdest them not today, and they do not behold thee. O sinless one! No person can see either heaven or hell. The scriptures, however, are the eyes of the virtuous. O King, frame thy conduct according to the scriptures. With pure heart, one should practice first the vow of Brahmacharya and then beget children and then perform sacrifices, for paying off the debt one owes to the Pythrus, the gods, and men. Performing sacrifices and engaged in procreating children, after having first observed the vow of Brahmacharya, one who hath wisdom for his eyes, casting off all anxiety of heart, should pay court to heaven, this world, and his own soul. 85. That king bent upon the practice of virtue who strives judiciously for acquiring heaven and earth and who takes of earthly goods just what is ordained, as the king's share, in the scriptures, wins a reputation that spread over all the worlds and among all creatures, mobile and immobile. The ruler of the Vedas, of clear understanding, having heard these words full of reason, become freed from grief, and taking Asma's leave proceeded towards his abode. O thou of unfading glory, cast off thy grief and rise up. Thou art equal to Sakra himself. Suffer thy soul to be gladdened. The earth has been won by thee in the exercise of Kshatriya duties. Enjoy her, O son of Kunti, and do not disregard my words. Section 29. Vaisampayana said, the foremost of kings, viz., Yudhishthira the son of Dharma, still remaining speechless. Pandu's son Arjuna addressed Krishna and spoke as follows. Arjuna said, this scorcher of foes, viz., Dharma's son, is burning with grief on account of his slaughtered kinsfolk. Comfort him, O Madhava. Once more, O Janardana, all of us have fallen into great danger. It behoveth thee, O mighty armed one, to dispel his grief. Vaisampayana continued, thus addressed by the high Sudarjana. The lotus-eyed Govinda of unfading glory turned his face towards the king. Kesava could not by any means be disregarded by Yudhishthira. From the earliest years Govinda was dearer to Yudhishthira than Arjuna himself. Taking up the king's hand adorned with sandal paste and looking like a column of marble, the mighty armed Soran began to speak, gladdening the hearts of all who listened to him. His face, adorned with teeth and eyes that were very beautiful, shone brightly like a full-blown lotus at sunrise. Vasudeva said, "Do not, O tiger among men, indulge in such grief that emaciates thy body. They who have been slain in this battle will on no account be got back. Those Kshatriyas, O king, that have fallen in this great battle, are even like objects that one acquires in one's dreams and that vanish when one awakes. All of them were heroes and ornaments of battle. They were vanquished while rushing with faces towards their foes. No one amongst them was slain with wounds on the back or while flying away. All of them, having contended with heroes in great battle and having cast off their life breaths then, have, sanctified by weapons, proceeded to heaven. It behoveth thee not to grieve for them. Devoted to the duties of Kshatriyas, possessed of courage, perfectly conversant with the Vedas and their branches, all of them have attained to that blissful end which is obtainable by heroes. It behoveth thee not to grieve for them after hearing of those high-souled lords of the earth, of ancient days, that departed from this world. In this connection is cited the old discourse of Narada before Saranjaya when the latter was deeply afflicted with grief on account of the death of his son. Narada said, "Subject to happiness and misery, myself, thyself, and all creatures, O Srinjaya, shall have to die. What cause then is there for sorrow? Listen to me as I recite the great blessedness of some ancient kings. Hear me with concentrated attention. Thou shalt then, O king, cast off thy grief. Listening to the story of those high-souled lords of the earth, abate thy sorrow. Oh, hear me as I recite their stories to thee in detail. By listening to the charming and delightful history of those kings of ancient times, malignant stars may be propitiated and the period of one's life be increased. We hear, O Srinjaya, that there was a king of the name of Mahabharata who was the son of a Vikshit. Even he fell a prey to death. The gods with Indra and Varuna and Vrihaspati at the head came to sacrifice, called Viswasraj, performed by the titled monarch. 86. Challenging Sakra, the chief of the gods, that king vanquished him in battle. The learned Vrihaspati, from desire of doing good unto Indra, had refused to officiate at Mahabharata's sacrifice. Thereupon Samvata, the younger brother of Vrihaspati, acceded to the king's request. During the rule of that king, O best of monarchs, the earth yielded crops without being tilled and was adorned with diverse kinds of ornaments. In the sacrifice of that king, the Viswadevas sat as courtiers, the Maruts acted as distributors of food and presents, and the high-souled Sadhus were also present. In that sacrifice of Mahabharata, the Maruts drank Soma. The sacrificial presents the king made surpassed, in value, those ever made by the gods, the Gandharvas, and men. When even that king, O Srinjaya, who transcended the in religious merit, knowledge, renunciation, and affluence, and who was purer than thy son, fell a prey to death, do not grieve for thy son. There was another king of the name of Sahitra the son of Atithi. We hear, O Srinjaya, that even he fell a prey to death. During his rule, Maghava showered gold for 1 whole year upon his kingdom. Obtaining that king for her lord, the earth became in reality and not in name only as before, Vasumati. 87. The rivers, during the sway of that king, bore golden tortoises, crabs, alligators, sharks, and porpoises, for the adorable Indra, O king, had showered these upon them. Beholding those golden fishes and sharks and tortoises in hundreds and thousands, Atithi's son became filled with wonder. Collecting that vast wealth of gold that covered the earth, Sahatra performed a sacrifice at Kurujantala and gave it away unto the Brahmanas. When that king, O Srinjaya, who transcended thee in the four attributes of religious merit, knowledge, renunciation, and affluence, and who was purer than thy son, fell to prey to death, do not grieve for thy son that is dead. Thy son never performed a sacrifice and never made gifts. Knowing this, pacify thy mind and do not give way to grief. 88. We hear also, O Srinjaya, that Vrihadratha, the king of the Angas, fell a prey to death. He gave away 100,000 steeds. 100,000 maidens also, adorned with golden ornaments, he gave away as presents in the sacrifice he performed. 100,000 elephants also of the best breed, he gave away as presents in another sacrifice performed by him. 100 millions also of bulls, adorned with golden chains, with thousands of kine accompanying them, he gave away as sacrificial presents. While the king of Anga performed his sacrifice by the hill called Vaishnupada, Indra became intoxicated with the soma he drank, and the Brahmanas with the presents they received. In the sacrifices, O monarch, numbering by hundreds, that this king performed of old, the presents he made far surpassed those ever made by the gods, the Gandharvas, and men. No other man was born, or will ever be born, that gave or will give away so much wealth as was given away by the king of the Angas in the 7 sacrifices he performed, each of which was characterized by the consecration of the Soma. 89. When, O Srinjaya, this Vrihadratha even, who was thy superior in the 4 attributes and who was purer than thy son, fell a prey to death, do not grieve for thy son that is dead. We hear also, O Srinjaya, that Sivi, the son of Usanara, fell a prey to death. That king swayed the whole earth as one sways the leathern shield in his hand. Riding on a single car that proved victorious in every battle, King Sivi caused the whole earth to resound with the rattle of his wheels and subjugated all monarchs. 90. Usanara's son Sivi gave away, in a sacrifice, all the kine and horses he had, both domestic and wild. The Creator himself thought that no one amongst the kings of the past or the future had or would have the ability to bear the burthen, O Srinjaya, that Usanara's son Sivi, that foremost of kings, that hero who was possessed of prowess equal to that of Indra himself, bore. Do not, therefore, grieve for thy son who never performed any sacrifice nor made any gift. Indeed, O Srinjaya, when Sivi, who was far superior to thee in the 4 attributes and who was purer than thy son, fell a prey to death, do not grieve for thy son that is dead. We hear, O Srinjaya, that the Hysald Bharatu also, the son of Dushmanta and Sikantala, who had a vast and well-filled treasury, fell a prey to death, devoting 300 horses unto the gods on the banks of the Yamuna, 20 on the banks of the Saraswati, and 14 on the banks of Ganga, that king of great energy, in days of old, performed, in this order, 1,000 horse sacrifices and 100 Rajasuyas. No one amongst the kings of the earth can imitate the great deeds of Bharata, even as no man can, by the might of his arms, soar into the welkin. Erecting numerous sacrificial altars, he gave away innumerable horses and untold wealth unto the sage Kanwa. 91. When even he, O Srinjaya, who was far superior to thee in the 4 attributes and who was purer than thy son, fell a prey to death, do not grieve for thy son that is dead. We hear, O Srinjaya, that Rama also, the son of Dasaratha, fell a prey to death. He always cherished his subjects as if they were the sons of his own loins. In his dominions there were no widows and none that was helpless. Indeed, Rama in governing his kingdom always acted like his father Dasaratha. The clouds, yielding showers seasonably, caused the crops to grow abundantly. During the period of his rule, food was always abundant in his kingdom. No death occurred by drowning or by fire. As long as Rama governed it, there was no fear in his kingdom of any disease. Every man lived for 1,000 years, and every man was blessed with 1,000 children. During the period of Rama's sway, all men were whole and all men attained the fruition of their wishes. The very women did not quarrel with one another. What need then be said of the men? During his rule his subjects were always devoted to virtue. Contented, crowned with fruition in respect of all the objects of their desire, fearless, free, and wedded to the vow of truth, were all the people when Rama governed the kingdom. The trees always bore flowers and fruit and were subject to no accidents. Every cow yielded milk filling a drone to the brim. Having dwelt, in the observance of severe penances, for 4 and 10 years in the woods, Rama performed 10 horse sacrifices of great splendor 92, and to them the freest access was given to all. Possessed of youth, of a dark complexion, with red eyes, he looked like the leader of an elephantine herd. With arms stretching down to his knees and of handsome face, his shoulders were like those of a lion and the might of his arms great. Ascending upon the throne of Ayodhya, he ruled for 10,100 years. When he, O Srinjaya, who transcended thee in the 4 principal attributes and who was purer than thy son, fell a prey to death, do not grieve for thy son that is dead. We hear, O Srinjaya, that King Bhagratu also died. In one of the sacrifices of that king, intoxicated with the soma he had drunk, Indra, the adorable chastiser of Parka and the chief of the gods, vanquished, by putting forth the might of his arms, many thousands of Asuras. King Bhagarata, in one of the sacrifices he performed, gave away 1,000,000 of maidens adorned with ornaments of gold. Each of those maidens sat upon a car, and unto each car were attached 4 steeds. With each car were 100 elephants, all of the foremost breed and decked with chains of gold. Behind each elephant were 1,000 steeds, and behind each steed 1,000 kine, and behind each cow 1,000 goats and sheep. The river goddess, Ganga, named, from before, Bhagrati, sat upon the lap of this king dwelling near her stream, and from this incident she came to be called Urvasi. 93. The triple-coursed Ganga had agreed to be the daughter of Bhagrata of Ikshvaku's race. That monarch ever engaged in the performance of sacrifices with presents in profusion unto the Brahmanas. 94. When he, O Srinjaya, who transcended thee in respect of the 4 principal attributes and who was purer than thy son, fell a prey to death, do not grieve for thy son. We hear, O Srinjaya, that the high Dilipa also fell a prey to death. The Brahmanas loved to recite his innumerable deeds. In one of his great sacrifices that king, with heart fully assenting, gave away the entire earth, abounding with wealth, unto the Brahmanas. In each sacrifice performed by him, the chief priest received as sacrificial fee 1,000 elephants made of gold. In one of his sacrifices, the stake, set up for slaughtering the victims, was made of gold and looked exceedingly beautiful. Discharging the duties assigned to them, the gods having sacrificed for their chief, used to seek the protection of that king. Upon that golden stake possessed of great effulgence and decked with a ring, 6,000 gods and Gandharvas danced in joy, and Viswavasu himself, in their midst played on his veena the 7 notes according to the rules that regulate their combinations. Such was the character of Viswavasu's music that every creature, whatever he might be, thought that the great Gandharva was playing to him alone. No other monarch could imitate this achievement of King Dilipa. the elephants of that king, intoxicated and adorned with housings of gold, used to lie down on the roads. 95. Those men proceeded to heaven that succeeded in obtaining a sight even of the high-souled king Dileepa, who was ever truthful in speech and whose bow could bear 100 foes equal in energy to 100 anantas. 96. These three sounds never ceased in Dileepa's abode, viz., the voice of Vedic recitations, the twang of bows, and cries of let it be given. When he, O Srinjaya, who transcended thee in the four principal attributes and who was purer than thy son, fell a prey to death, do not grieve for thy son that is dead. Yuvana's was son mandatory also, O Sanjaya, we have heard, fell a prey to death. The deities named Maruts extracted the child from his sire's stomach through one of its sides, sprung from a quantity of clarified butter that had been sanctified by mantras, and that had by mistake been quaffed by his sire instead of his sire's spouse. Mandatory was born in the stomach of the high-souled Uvanaswa. Possessed of great prosperity, King Mandatory conquered the three worlds. Beholding that child of celestial beauty lying on the lap of his sire, the god asked one another, from whom shall this child obtain suck? Then Indra approached him, saying, he shall obtain suck even from me. From this circumstance, the chief of the deities came to call the child by the name of Mandatory. 97. From the nourishment of that high-souled child of Uvanaswa, the finger of Indra, placed in his mouth, began to yield a jet of milk. Sucking Indra's finger, he grew up into a stout youth in 100 days. In 12 days he looked like one of 12 years. The whole earth in one day came under the sway of that high-souled and virtuous and brave king who resembled Indra himself for prowess in battle. He vanquished kings Angada, Maruta, Asita, Gaya, and Vrihadratha, the king of the Angas. 98. When Uvanas was sent forth in battle with Angada, the gods thought that the firmament was breaking with the twang of his bow. The whole earth from where the sun rises to where he sets is said to be the field of Mandatory. Having performed horse sacrifices and 100 Rajasuyas, he gave unto the Brahmanas many Rohita fishes. Those fishes were each 10 yojanas in length and 1 in breadth. Those that remained after gratifying the Brahmanas were divided amongst themselves by the other classes. When he, O Srinjaya, who transcended thee in respect of the four principal attributes and who was purer than thy son, fell a prey to death, do not grieve for thy son that is dead. We hear, O Sanjaya, that Yayati, the son of Nuasha, also fell a prey to death. Having subjugated the whole world with its seas, he journeyed through it, decking it with successive sacrificial altars, the intervals between which were measured by throws of a heavy piece of wood. Indeed, he reached the very shores of the sea as he proceeded performing great sacrifices on those altars along his way. 99. Having performed 1,000 sacrifices and 100 Vajipas, he gratified the foremost of Brahmanas with 3 mountains of gold. Having slain many Daityas and Danavas duly arrayed in battle, Nuasha's son, Yayati, divided the whole earth among his children. At last, discarding his other sons headed by Yadu and Rahu, he installed his youngest son, Puru, on his throne and then entered the woods accompanied by his wife. When he, O Srinjaya, who far surpassed thee in the four principal attributes and who was purer than thy son, fell a prey to death, do not grieve for thy son that is dead. We hear, O Srinjaya, that Amvarishu also, the son of Nabhaga, fell a prey to death. That protector of the world, and foremost of kings, was regarded by his subjects as the embodiment of virtue. That monarch, in one of his sacrifices, assigned to the Brahmanas, for waiting upon them, 1,000,000 of kings who had themselves performed thousands of sacrifices each. Men of piety praised Amvarisha, the son of Nabhaga, saying that such feats had never been achieved before nor would their like be achieved in the future. 100. those hundreds upon hundreds and thousands upon thousands of kings, that had at the command of Amvarisha waited at his sacrifices upon the Brahmanas that came there, became, through Amvarisha's merits, crowned with the fruits of the horse sacrifice, and followed their lord by the southern path, to regions of brightness and bliss. When he, O Srinjaya, who far surpassed thee in the four principal attributes and who was purer than thy son, fell a prey to death, do not grieve for thy child that is dead. We hear, O Srinjaya, that Sasavindu also, the son of Chitrasena, fell a prey to death. That Hisult king had 100,000 wives, and million of sons. All of them used to wear golden armor, and all of them were excellent bowmen. Each of those princes married 100 princesses, and each princess brought 100 elephants. With each of those elephants were 100 cars. With each car were 100 steeds, all of good breed and all decked with trappings of gold. With each steed were 100 kine, and with each cow were 100 sheep and goats. This countless wealth, O monarch, Sasavindu gave away, in a horse sacrifice, unto the Brahmanas. When he, O Srinjaya, who far surpassed thee in the four principal attributes and who was purer than thy son, fell a prey to death, do not grieve for thy child that is dead. We hear, O Srinjaya, that Gaya also, the son of Amritaras, fell a prey to death. For 100 years, that king subsisted upon the remains of sacrificial food. Pleased with such devotion, Agni desired to give him boons. The boons solicited by Gaia were, let my wealth be inexhaustible even if I give ceaselessly. Let my regard for virtue exist forever. Let my heart ever take pleasure in truth, through thy grace, O eater of sacrificial libations. It hath been heard by us that King Gaia obtained all those wishes from Agni. On days of the new moon, on those of the full moon, and on every 4th month, for 1,000 years, Gaia repeatedly performed the horse sacrifice. Rising, at the completion of every sacrifice, he gave away 100,000 kine and hundreds of mules, unto the Brahmanas, during this period. That bull among men gratified the gods with Soma, the Brahmanas with wealth, the Baitrus with Swada, and the women with the accomplishment of all their wishes. In his great horse sacrifice, King Gaia caused a golden ground to be made, measuring 100 cubits in length and 50 in breadth, and gave it away as the sacrificial fee. That foremost of men, viz., Gaia, the son of Amritaras, gave away as many kine as there are sand grains, O king, in the river Ganga. When he, O Srinjaya, who far surpassed thee in the four principal attributes and who was purer than thy son, fell a prey to death, do not grieve for thy son that is dead. We hear, O Srinjaya, that Socrates' son Rantideva also fell a prey to death. Having undergone the ostrist of penances and adored him with great reverence, he obtained these boons from Sakra, having solicited them, saying, let us have abundant food and numerous guests. Let not my faith sustain any diminution, and let us not have to ask anything of any person. The animals, both domestic and wild, slaughtered in his sacrifice, used to come to him, viz., the Hisudrantidiva of rigid vows and great fame, of their own accord. The secretions that flowed from the skins of the animals, slaughtered in his sacrifices, produced a mighty and celebrated river which to this day is known by the name of Chamanwati. King Rantideva used to make gifts unto the Brahmanas in an extensive enclosure. When the king said, unto thee I give 100 nishkas, unto thee I give 100, the Brahmanas, without accepting what was offered, made a noise, expressive of refusal. When, however, the king would say, I give 1,000 nishkas, the gifts were all accepted. All the vessels and plates, in Rantideva's palace, for holding food and other articles, all the jugs and pots, the pans and plates and cups, were of gold. On those nights during which the guests used to live in Rantideva's abode, 20,100 kine had to be slaughtered. Yet even on such occasions, the cooks, decked in earrings, used to proclaim, amongst those that sat down to supper, "There is abundant soup, take as much as ye wish, but of flesh we have not as much today as on former occasions." When he, O Srinjaya, who far surpassed thee in the four principal attributes and who was purer than thy son, fell a prey to death, do not grieve for thy son that is dead. We hear, O Srinjaya, that the Sagara also fell a prey to death. He was of Ikshvaku's race, a tiger among men, and of superhuman prowess. 60,000 suns used to walk behind him, like myriads upon myriads of stars waiting upon the moon in the cloudless firmament of autumn. His sway extended over the whole of this earth. 101. He gratified the gods by performing 1,000 horse sacrifices. He gave away unto deserving Brahmanas palatial mansions with columns of gold and other parts, made entirely of that precious metal, containing costly beds and bevies of beautiful ladies with eyes resembling petals of the lotus, and divers other kinds of valuable objects. At his command, the Brahmanas divided those gifts among themselves. Through anger that king caused the earth to be excavated, whereupon she came to have the ocean on her bosom, and for this, the ocean has come to be called Sagara after his name. When he, O Srinjaya, who far surpassed thee in the four principal attributes and who was purer than thy son, fell a prey to death, do not grieve for thy son that is dead. We hear, O Srinjaya, that King Prithu also, the son of Vena, fell a prey to death. The great rishis, assembling together in the great forest, installed him in the sovereignty of the earth. And because it was thought that he would advance all mankind, he was, for that reason, called Prithu, the advancer. And because also he protected people from injuries, Kshata, he was, for that reason, called a Kshatriya, protector from injuries. Beholding Prithu the son of Vena, all the creatures of the earth exclaimed, "We have been lovingly attached to him." From this circumstance of the loving attachment to him of all creatures, he came to be called a Raja, one that can inspire attachment. The earth, during his sway, yielded crops without being tilled, every leaf that the trees had bore honey, and every cow yielded a jugful of milk. All men were hale and all their wishes used to be crowned with fruition. They had no fear of any kind. They used to live, as they pleased, in fields or in sheltered houses. When Prithu desired to go over the sea, the waters became solidified. The rivers also never swelled up when he had to cross them but remained perfectly calm. The standard on his car moved freely everywhere, without being obstructed by any impediment. King Prithu, in one of his grand horse sacrifices, gave away unto the Brahmanas 21 mountains of gold, each measuring 3 nalwas. 102. When he, O Srinjaya, who far surpassed thee in the four principal attributes and who was purer than thy son, fell a prey to death, do not grieve for thy son that is dead. Upon what, O Srinjaya, dost thou reflect in silence? It seems, O king, that thou hearest not these words of mine. If thou hast not heard them, then this discourse of mine has been a fruitless rhapsody, like medicine or diet, to a person on the point of death. Srinjaya said, I am attending, O Narada, to this discourse of thine, of excellent import and perfumed like a garland of flowers, this discourse upon the conduct of high-souled royal sages of meritorious deeds and great fame, that can certainly dispel grief. Thy discourse, O great sage, has not been a fruitless rhapsody. I have been freed from grief at thy very sight. Like one never satiated with drinking nectar, I am not satiated with thy words. O thou of true sight, if thou, O Lord, be inclined to show thy grace towards this person burning on account of the death of his son, then that son, through that grace of thine, is sure to be revived and to mingle once more with me in this life. Narada said, I will give back to thee that son of thine, named Shubhanashthaivan, whom Parvata gave thee and who has been bereft of life, of the splendor of gold. That child shall have 1,000 years. Section 30. Yudhishthira said, how did the son of Srinjaya become Shubhanashthaivan? 103. Why also did Parvata give Srinjaya a child? And why did he die? When the lives of all men in those days extended for 1,000 years, why did Srinjaya's son die in infancy? Or was he in name only Shubhanashthaivan? How also did he come to be so? I desire to know all this. Krishna said, I will recite to thee, O king, the facts as they happened. There are 2 rishis, the foremost ones in the world, named Narada and Parvata. Narada is the maternal uncle and Parvata is his sister's son. With cheerful hearts, the uncle Narada and the nephew Parvata had, in days of old, O king, left heaven for a pleasant tremble on earth for tasting clarified butter and rice. Both of them, possessed of great ascetic merit, wandered over the earth, subsisting on food taken by human beings. Filled with joy and entertaining great affection for each other, they entered into a compact that, whatever wish, good or bad, would be entertained by one should be disclosed to the other, but on the event of one of them acting otherwise, he should be subject to the other's curse. Agreeing to that understanding, those 2 great rishis, adored of all the worlds, repaired to King Srinjaya, the son of Satya, and said unto him, we 2, for thy good, shall dwell with thee for a few days. O Lord of earth, do thou attend to all our wants duly. The king, saying, so be it, set himself to attend upon them hospitably. After a while, one day, the king, filled with joy, introduced to those illustrious ascetics his daughter of the fairest complexion, saying, this my daughter will wait upon you both. Bright as the filaments of the lotus, she is beautiful and of faultless limbs, accomplished and of sweet manners, and is called Sukumari by name. Very well, said the rishis in reply, upon which the king directed his daughter, telling her, O child, attend upon these 2 brahmanas as thou wouldest upon the gods or thy sire. The virtuous princess, saying, so be it, began to attend upon them in obedience to her father's behest. Her dutiful services and her unrivaled beauty very soon inspired Narada with a tender flame towards her. That tender sentiment began to grow in the heart of the illustrious saint like the moon gradually waxing on the accession of the lighted fortnight. The virtuous Narada, however, overwhelmed by shame, could not disclose that burning attachment to his sister's son, the high-souled Parvata. By his ascetic power, as also by signs, Parvata understood all. Inflamed with rage, the latter thereupon resolved to curse the love-afflicted Narada. And he said, having of thy own accord made a compact with me that, whatever wish, good or bad, would be cherished by either of us should be disclosed to the other, thou hast violated it. These were thy own words, O Brahmana. It is for this that I shall curse thee. Thou didst not tell me before that thy heart has been pierced by the charms of the maiden Sukumari. It is for this that I shall curse thee. Thou art a Brahmacharin. Thou art my preceptor. Thou art an ascetic and a Brahmana. Yet hast thou broken the compact thou hadst made with me. Fitted with rage I shall, for this, curse even thee. Listen to me. This Sukumari shall, without doubt, become thy wife. From the time of thy marriage, however, O puissant one, both she and all men shall behold thee an ape, for thy true features having disappeared, an ape shalt thou appear unto all. Hearing these words of his, the uncle Narada, filled with wrath, cursed his nephew Parvata in return, saying, although thou hast ascetic merit and brahmacharya and truth and self-restraint, and although thou art ever devoted to virtue, thou shalt not yet succeed in proceeding to heaven. Filled with rage and desire of vengeance, They thus cursed and flamed against each other like a couple of infuriated elephants. From that time the high Mahabharata began to wander over the earth, respected as he deserved, O Bharata, for his own energy. Narada, then, that foremost of Brahmanas, obtained according to due rights the hand of Saranjaya's daughter, the faultless Sukumari. The princess, however, beheld Narada exactly as the curse had said. Indeed, just after the last of the wedding mantras had been recited, Sukumari beheld the celestial rishi to have a face like that of an ape. She, however, did not on that account disregard her lord. On the other hand, she dedicated her love to him. Indeed, the princess, chaste as she was, devoted herself entirely to her lord and did not in her heart even desire anyone else among the gods, munis, and yakshas for a husband. One day, as the illustrious Parvata, in course of his wanderings, entered a solitary forest, he beheld Narada there. Saluting him, Parvata said, "Show thy grace unto me by permitting me, O puissant one, to go to heaven." Seeing the cheerless Parvata kneeling before him with joined hands, Narada, himself more cheerless, said unto him, "Thou hadst cursed me first, saying, Be thou an ape. After thou hadst said so unto me, I cursed thee from anger, saying, From this day thou shalt not dwell in heaven. It was not well of thee, since thou art like a son unto me." The two saints then freed each other from their mutual curses. Beholding her husband possessed of celestial form and blazing with beauty, Sukumari fled from him, taking him to be somebody other than her lord. Seeing the beautiful princess flying away from her lord, Parvata addressed her, saying, "This one is even thy husband. Do not entertain any scruple. This one is the illustrious and puissant Rishi Narada, that foremost of virtuous persons. He is thy lord, of one soul with thee. Do not have any doubt." Assured in diverse ways by the high Parvata and informed also of the curse on her lord, the princess regained her equanimity. Then Parvata proceeded to heaven and Narada to his home. Vasudeva continued, "The illustrious Rishi Narada, who was himself an actor in this matter, is here. O best of men, asked by thee, he will tell thee everything that happened." Section 31. Vaisampayana said, "The royal son of Pandu then addressed Narada, saying, O Holy One, I desire to hear of the birth of the child whose excreta were gold." Thus addressed by King Yudhishthira the Just, the sage Narada began to narrate to him all that had occurred in connection with that child of golden excreta. Narada said, "It is even so, O thou of mighty arms, as Kusavahir hath said. Asked by thee, I shall now recite the portion that remains of this story. Myself, and my sister's son, the great ascetic Parvata, came, on one occasion, unto Saranjaya, that foremost of all victorious kings, for dwelling with him. Honoured by him with due rights, and with every wish of ours gratified, we took up our residence in his abode. After the season of rains had gone, and when the time came for our own departure, Parvata said unto me those words of grave import suitable to the hour: "We have, O Brahmana, dwelt in the abode of this king for some time, highly honoured by him. Think of what return we should make." I then, O monarch, addressed Parvata of blessed aspect, saying, "O nephew, this becomes thee, and, O thou of great power, all this depends upon thyself. Through thy boons let the king be made happy and let him obtain his wishes. Or, if thou choosest, let him be crowned with success through the ascetic merits of both of us." After this, Parvata having called King Srinjaya, that foremost of victorious persons, said unto him these words: "O bull of Kuru's race, we have been exceedingly gratified, O king, with thy hospitable attentions given to us with every sincerity. With our permission, O foremost of men, think of the boon thou shouldst solicit. Let the boon, however, be such that it may not imply enmity to the gods or destruction to men. Accept then, O king, a boon, for thou deservest one as we think. Hearing these words, Srinjaya replied, If ye have been gratified with me, my object then has been gained, for that of itself has been my greatest gain, and that is regarded by me as the fruition of all my desire. And to Srinjaya, who said so, Parvati again said, Solicit, O king, the fruition of that wish which thou art cherishing in thy heart for a long time. Srinjaya answered, I desire a son that shall be heroic and possessed of great energy, firm in his vows and of long life, highly blessed and possessed of splendor equal to that of the chief himself of the deities. At this, Parvati said, This thy desire shall be fulfilled. Thy child, however, shall not be long-lived, for thy wish for such a son is even for prevailing over the chief of the gods. Thy son shall be known by the name of Shubhanashthavan. He shall be possessed of splendor like that of the chief of the gods, but take care to protect him always from that deity. Hearing these words of the high-souled Parvati, Srinjaya began to beseech that saint for ordaining otherwise, saying, Let my son be long-lived, O moon, through thy ascetic merit. Parvati, however, said nothing, through partiality for Indra. Beholding the king very cheerless, I said unto him, Think of me, O king, in thy distress, and I shall promise to come when thought of by thee. Do not grieve, O Lord of earth. I will give thee back thy beloved child, even if he be dead, in his living form. Having said so unto that monarch, both of us left his presence for coming to where we wished, and Srinjaya returned to his abode as he pleased. After some time had elapsed, the royal sage Srinjaya had borne unto him a son of great prowess and blazing forth with energy. The child grew up like a large lotus in a lake, and became Shubhanashthavan in reality as in name. This extraordinary fact, O best of the Kuras, soon became widely known over the world. The chief of the gods also came to know it as the result of Parvati's boon. Fearing humiliation at the hands of the child when he would grow up, the slayer of Vala and Vritra began to watch for the lackeys of the prince. He commanded his celestial weapon Thunder, standing before him in embodied shape, saying, Go, O puissant one, and assuming the form of a tiger slay this prince. When grown up, this child of Srinjaya may, by his achievements, humiliate me, O Thunder, as Parvati said. Thus addressed by Sakra, the celestial weapon Thunder, that subjugator of hostile towns, began from that day to continually watch for the lackeys of the prince. Srinjaya, meanwhile, having obtained that child whose splendor resembled that of Indra himself, became filled with joy. The king, accompanied by his wives, and the other ladies of his household, shook up his residence in the midst of a forest. One day, on the shores of the Bhagrati, the boy, accompanied by his nurse, ran hither and thither in play. Though only 5 years of age, his prowess, even then, resembled that of a mighty elephant. While thus employed, the child met a powerful tiger that came upon him suddenly. The infant prince trembled violently as he was being crushed by the tiger and soon fell down lifeless on the earth. At this sight the nurse uttered loud cries of grief. Having slain the prince, the tiger, through Indra's powers of delusion, vanished there and then. Hearing the voice of the crying nurse, the king, in great anxiety, ran to the spot. He beheld his son there, his blood quaffed off, and lying lifeless on the ground like the moon dropped from the firmament. Taking up on his lap the boy covered with blood, the king, with heart stricken by grief, began to lament piteously. The royal ladies then, afflicted with grief and crying, quickly ran to the spot where King Srinjaya was. In that situation the king thought of me with concentrated attention. Knowing that the king was thinking of me, I appeared before him. Stricken with grief as the king was, I recited to him all those stories, O monarch, that hero of Yadu's race has already recited to thee. I brought Bisaranjaya's child back to life, with Indra's permission. That which is ordained must occur. It is impossible that it should be otherwise. After this, Prince Shubhanashthaivan of great fame and energy began to delight the hearts of his parents. Of great prowess, he ascended the throne of his father after the latter had repaired to heaven, and ruled for a period of 1,100 years. He worshipped the gods in many great sacrifices characterized by profuse presents. Possessed of great splendor, he gratified the gods and the Pitris. Having procreated many sons, all of whom by their issues multiplied the race, he went the way of all nature, O king, after many years. Do thou, O foremost of kings, dispel this grief born in thy heart, even as Kesava has counselled thee, as also Vyasa of austere penances. Rise up, O king, and bear the burthen of this thy ancestral kingdom, and perform high and great sacrifices so that thou mayst obtain, hereafter, whatever regions may be desired by thee. Section 32. Vaisampayana said, unto King Yudhishthira, who still remained speechless and plunged in grief, the island-born Vyasa, that great ascetic, conversant with truths of religion, spoke again. Vyasa said, O thou vise like lotus petals, the protection of subjects is the duty of kings. Those men that are always observant of duty regard duty to be all-powerful. Do thou, therefore, O king, walk in the steps of thy ancestors. With Brahmanas, penances are a duty. This is the eternal ordinance of the Vedas. Penances, therefore, O bull of Bharata's race, constitute the eternal duty of Brahmanas. A Kshatriya is the protector of all persons in respect of their duties. 104. That man who, addicted to earthly possessions, transgresses wholesome restraints, that offender against social harmony, should be chastised with a strong hand. That insensate person who seeks to transgress authority, be he an attendant, a son, or even a saint, indeed, all men of such sinful nature, should by every means be chastised or even killed. That king who conducts himself otherwise incurs sin. He who does not protect morality when it is being disregarded is himself a trespasser against morality. The Kauravas were trespassers against morality. They have, with their followers, been slain by thee. Thou hast been observant of the duties of thy own order. Why then, O son of Pandu, dost thou indulge in such grief? The king should slay those that deserve death, make gifts to persons deserving of charity, and protect his subjects according to the ordinance. Yudhishthira said, I do not doubt the words that fall from thy lips, O thou of great ascetic merit. Everything appertaining to morality and duty is well known to thee, O foremost of all persons conversant with morality and duty. I have, however, for the sake of kingdom, caused many persons to be slain. Those deeds, O Brahmana, are burning and consuming me. Vyasa said, O Bharata, is the Supreme Being the doer, or is man the doer? Is everything the result of chance in the world, or are the fruits that we enjoy or suffer the results of previous action? If man, O Bharata, does all acts, good or bad, being urged thereto by the Supreme Being, then the fruits of those acts should attach to the Supreme Being himself. If a person cuts down, with an axe, a tree in forest, it is the person that incurs the sin and not the axe by any means. Or, if it be said that, the axe being only the material cause, the consequence of the act of cutting should attach to the animate agent, and not to the inanimate tool, then the sin may be said to belong to the person that has made the axe. This, however, can scarcely be true. If this be not reasonable, O son of Kunti, that one man should incur the consequence of an act done by another, then, guided by this, thou shouldst throw all responsibility upon the Supreme Being. 105. If, again, man be himself the agent of all his acts virtuous and sinful, then supreme director there is none, and, therefore, whatever thou hast done cannot bring evil consequences on thee. 106. No one, O king, can ever turn away from that which is destined. If, again, destiny be the result of the acts of former lives, then no sin can attach to one in this life, even as the sin of cutting down a tree cannot touch the maker of the axe. 107. If thou thinkest it is chance only that acts in the world, then such an act of destruction could never happen nor will ever happen. 108. If it is necessary to ascertain what is good and what is evil in the world, attend to the scriptures. In those scriptures it has been laid down that kings should stand with the rod of chastisement uplifted in their hands. I think, O Bharata, that acts, good and bad, are continually revolving here as a wheel, and men obtain the fruits of those acts, good or bad, that they do. One sinful act proceeds from another. Therefore, O tiger among kings, avoid all evil acts and do not thus set thy heart upon grief. Thou shouldst adhere, O Bharata, to the duties, even if reproachable, of thy own order. This self-destruction, O king, does not look well in thee. Expiations, O king, have been ordained for evil acts. He that is alive can perform them, but he that dies fails in their performance. Therefore, O king, without laying down thy life, perform those expiatory acts. If thou dost not perform them, thou mayst have to repent in the next world. Section 33. Yudhishthira said, sons and grandsons and brothers and sires and fathers-in-law and preceptors and maternal uncles and grandsires, many high-souled kshatriyas, many relatives, by marriage, friends, companions, sisters' sons, and kinsmen, O grandsire, and many foremost of men coming from diverse countries, have fallen. All these, O grandsire, have been caused to be slain by myself alone, from desire of kingdom. Having caused so many heroic kings who were always devoted to righteousness and all of whom had quaffed soma in sacrifices, what end shall I attain, O great ascetic? Thinking that this earth has been bereft of many lions among kings, all of whom were in the enjoyment of great prosperity, I burn continually to this day. Having witnessed this slaughter of kinsmen and millions of other men, I burn with grief, O grandsire. Oh, what will be the plight of those foremost of ladies who have been deprived of sons, of husbands, and of brothers? Reproaching the Pandavas and the Vrishanis as cruel murderers, those ladies, with emaciated features and plunged in grief, will throw themselves on the earth. Not beholding their sires and brothers and husbands and sons, those ladies, through affliction, casting off their life breath, will go to the abode of Yama, O foremost of Brahmanas. I have no doubt of this. The course of morality is very subtle. It is plain that we shall be stained with the guilt of slaughtering women for this. Having slain our kinsmen and friends and thereby committed an inexpiable sin, we shall have to fall into hell with heads downwards. O best of men, we shall, therefore, waste our limbs with the austerest of penances. Tell me, O grandsire, to what mode of life I should betake myself then? Vaisampayana continued. Hearing these words of Yudhishthira, the island-born rishi, having reflected keenly for some time, addressed the son of Bandhu as follows. Vyasa said, remembering the duties of a kshatriya, O king, do not give way to grief. All those kshatriyas, O bull among kshatriyas, have fallen in the observance of their proper duties. In the pursuit of great prosperity and of great fame on earth, those foremost of men, all of whom were liable to death, 109, have perished through the influence of time. Thou hast not been their slayer, nor this Bhima, nor Arjuna, nor the twins. It is time that took away their life breaths according to the great law of change. Time hath neither mother nor father, nor anybody for whom he is disposed to show any favor. He is the witness of the acts of all creatures. By him have they been taken away. This battle, O bull of Bharata's race, was only an occasion ordained by him. He causes creatures to be slain through the instrumentality of creatures. This is the manner in which it puts forth its irresistible power. Know that time, in his dealings with creatures, is dependent upon the bond of action and is the witness of all actions good and bad. It is time that brings about the fruits, fraught with bliss or woe, of our actions. Think, O mighty armed one, of the acts of those Kshatriyas that have fallen. Those acts were the causes of their destruction, and it is in consequence of them that they have perished. Think also of thy own acts consisting of observances of vows with restrained soul. And think also how thou hast been forced by the Supreme Ordainer to do such an act, as the slaughter of so many human beings. As a weapon made by a smith or carpenter is under the control of the person that is handling it, and moves as he moves it, similarly this universe, controlled by actions done in time, moves as those actions move it. Seeing that the births and deaths of creatures take place without any assignable cause and in perfect wantonness, grief and joy are perfectly needless. Although this entanglement of thy heart is a mere delusion, still, if it pleaseth thee, O king, perform expiatory rites, for washing thyself free of thy so-called sin. It is heard, O Patha, that the gods and the Asuras fought against each other. The Asuras were the elder, and the gods the younger brothers. Covetous of prosperity, fierce was the battle fought between them. The fight lasted for 32,000 years. Making the earth one vast expanse of blood, the gods slew the deities and gained possession of heaven. Having obtained possession of the earth, a large number of Brahmanas, conversant with the Vedas, armed themselves, stupefied with pride, with the Danavas for giving them help in the fight. They were known by the name of Salavrika and numbered 80,000. All of them, however, were slain by the gods. Those wicked suit persons who desire the extinction of virtue and who set sinfulness a-going deserve to be slain even as the furious deities were slain by the gods. If by slaying a single individual a family may be saved, or if by slaying a single family the whole kingdom may be saved, such an act of slaughter will not be a transgression. Sin, O king, sometimes assumes the form of virtue, and virtue sometimes assumes the form of sin. They, however, that are learned, know which is which. Therefore, console thyself, O son of Pandu, for thou art well versed in the scriptures. Thou hast, O Bharata, only followed the path formerly trodden by the very gods. Men like yourselves never go to hell, O bull of Pandu's race. Comfort these thy brothers and all thy friends, O scorcher of foes. He who deliberately engages himself in sinful acts, and committing sinful acts feels no shame but continues the same as before, is called, in the scripture, a great sinner. There is no expiation for him, and his sins know no diminution. Thou art born in noble race. Forced by the faults of others, thou hast most unwillingly done this, and having done this thou repentest of it. The horse sacrifice, that grand rite, has been indicated as an expiation for thee. Make preparations for that sacrifice, O monarch, and thou shalt be freed from thy sins. The divine chastiser of Parka, having vanquished his foes with the assistance of the Maruts, gradually performed 100 sacrifices and became Satagratu. 110, freed from sin, possessed of heaven, and having obtained many regions of bliss and great happiness and prosperity, Sakra, surrounded by the Maruts, is shining in beauty and illuminating all the quarters with his splendor. The Lord of Sakhi is adored in the heavens by the Apsaras. The Rishis and the other gods all worship him with reverence. Thou hast got the earth through thy prowess. All the kings have been vanquished by thee, O sinless one, through thy prowess. Proceeding with thy friends to their kingdom, O king, install their brothers, sons, or grandsons on their thrones. Behaving with kindness towards even the children in the womb, make thy subjects glad and happy, and rule the earth. Install on their thrones the daughters of those